right, we are live, everybody. Thank you for coming to tonight's PACE meeting promoting a sustainable Easton, dated March 5th, 2025. In keeping with a hybrid meeting, it's going to be conducted in person and remotely over Zoom. Attendance by members can be in person or remote. Both types of attendance shall count to a quorum. Meeting is going to be broadcast live and recorded on ECAT. If you're on Zoom and mobile, please raise your hand, insert comments into the chat. Appreciate you joining us, and we're looking forward to a great session tonight. If I could, I'm just going to go around, and if you could say your name and present as a roll call, that would be great, starting at the end with Denise.
Denise Higgins, present.
Cabral, present.
Chris Cohen, present.
Marissa Souza, present.
Nancy Donahue, present.
Tom Broussard, present.
Jen Starr, present.
Hodge John, present.
Wendy Nightingale, present.
Chris Mills, present.
James Hamilton, present.
Jocelyn Byers, present.
Present. Awesome, present. Thank you for everybody coming. So tonight, everybody, we have on our agenda discussion and follow-up regarding the February 26, 2025 open house. Just feedback we may have heard, other stakeholder engagement feedback. We do want to just finalize tonight our override expectations, which I think this will be our third go at it, so we can incorporate any learnings we may have had. It's completely okay if you don't have a change, so don't feel like you have to, but if you want to make any adjustments, this is the last chance. And then at that point, we'll vote to finalize the recommendation so that we can put it in our documentation to go back to the select board and the town with. We have our community compact discussion. Thank you all so much for getting back with your feedback. Tons of great just thoughts. So I'm looking forward to sharing that. Connor is going to give us an update in terms of the latest budget change memo number 1. Additional community engagement dates. So huge shout out and thanks to everybody who showed up on Monday. Last night was a great engagement with FinCom. We're here tonight. Tomorrow night's another Q&A on Zoom. There was a library meeting today, so lots of engagement going on. Coffee with Pace is Friday morning. It's going to be sold out. Get there early. I'm just saying. If you want to show up, it's going to be sold out. And then we just want to schedule and confirm the remaining PACE meetings. I'll get there, guys. It's a long day. Through the deliverable to the select board at the March 24 meeting. So first off, I guess just regarding the open house, I'll just quickly say thank you all so much. It was incredible. The turnout was incredible. I thought the venue was spot on. So thank you to the school team, Mr. C, and all of them who were waiting for all of us to get out to clean at the very end. But they were just amazing. Connor to the town team that helped us set up. I thought it was just amazing for the turnout. We got great feedback. So I'll just pause there. Maybe we can go around the room in the opposite direction, starting with Dottie, and just get your feedback, thoughts, notes. You know, certainly if there's anything that stands out like, wow, I learned something earth-shattering, and I think it's important for us to consider it, or maybe it's just affirmation, but everything in between.
I thought it was great. Excellent turnout.
Thanks.
I love the setup where the first half hour people were, able to go around. A lot of people commented on the do-know boards that was really helpful. And a lot of people commented that they thought it was really great that, our department heads were there and they could just walk up to the police chief and directly ask questions, fire chief, DPW, schools to be able to do that. So I thought the questions were very thoughtful and respectful and good questions, and I was really glad that people, it's hard, when we're used to doing this a lot, we kind of take it for granted that it's just easy to get up and talk in front of people, and so, for people to get up and speak in front of that big of a crowd and ask a question, I really give them a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, well said.
And you and Nancy did an amazing job. I think the two of you back and forth like that was, it was good because it could give you a little bit of time to pause and absorb, rather than one person talking the whole time.
Sure.
So you did a great job.
She carries a lot of weight, but together we get there.
But a team effort, I could not do it alone.
Jocelyn?
I mean, it was a great turnout. I also was going to comment that I thought the presentation was very well done. It was long, but it never felt long. I think you spent an appropriate amount of time on each topic and it flowed and it was really well done and I think well received. And overall, I was just pleasantly surprised at how positive everyone seemed to be. not everyone, but just overall, it was received very well.
Yeah, that's cool. I do appreciate that you put the plug in before the session started about the MVP status of the greeters. I thought that was it was appropriate. It was great feedback.
Yeah, we only heard mostly people were really smiling when they came in and they were happy to be there and they were thankful that we were having the event. There were only a handful of people who were like, wait, what? I just came for the presentation. I could have come a half an hour later. I mean, you get some of that, but then I imagine they walk through the doors and then they experience it and it changes their mind and then they have a good experience.
I will say, no joking aside, that having the greeters there and having the stations there, it really came off to me professional. We knew our stuff. We were available. We were communicative. We helped people get to where they needed to get to. We moved a lot of people in and out of different areas, which is not always the easiest thing. Mm-hmm. So just a huge credit, I guess, to the entire team for that. And we had to staff 7 doors or something, right? We had people everywhere. Three different doors. Jim?
Yeah, I thought it went really well. It's great that the Y was there. I staffed the door with the parents bringing the kids in, so that was nice. I had to kind of figure out where that was, but overall it went really well. A really positive feedback from a lot of neighbors and friends. That even though I'm on the committee, they learned a lot that maybe they've just started ignoring me about. But I thought it was really well received, and I thought you both did a very good job with the presentation. So
appreciate it, team. Chris?
Geez, I'm not sure I was at the same meeting. Chris and I must have gotten some of the more concerned people, but logistically, it was a layup. I mean, it was really well done and everything. And as a Y board member, I have to say thank you to the Y for the babysitting as well, because I think that was a huge draw.
Huge.
That said, I counted, I think, by the end of the night, I had 13 different people come up to me and not irritated by any means, but again, wanting specific cuts, wanting to know. That was, I know I'm constantly saying it, but I just kept going, wow, another person. And these weren't people that knew me or anything, but I was able to direct them to each department head. I'd probably say it was 60-40 people concerned about the school cuts versus municipal side. But
makes sense.
Definitely not from an animosity standpoint, but that seems to be the pulse of every, you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. The good news is it's getting realer every week, so
Yep.
We'll get there. Wendy?
So people that I spoke with were mostly interested in wanting to understand more. In particular, questions I got were, why can't we just increase taxes for businesses? So, I've just explained how you're limited by your levy as a whole, instead of just being able to increase taxes to whatever you want, like just for businesses.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that was mostly
Education.
what I heard about.
Sir?
I thought it was great. It's a lot of logistics to pull a meeting like that together, so I want to say thanks to my staff and also to Dr. Cabral's team and Sam Cedarbaum and the folks at the schools, folks at Public Works, to turn over that space when 30 minutes before it was, the students were in there was a really great job. So I was really appreciative of how thoughtful residents were. This is frankly, none of us want to be having this conversation. There's never a good time to talk about a tax increase or large cuts to services people care a lot about. And same with the first open house, the mingling section, I was assigned to the tax area. So there were some folks who were a bit pointed, but never inappropriate, and really thoughtful and wanting to understand. And they had really good questions. And I was pretty floored by how positive. It makes it sound like everyone was saying we're excited about this. I don't think anyone was saying that, but there was a few folks who got up and were expressing appreciation to all of you as citizens, giving your time for free to spend so much time on this for your neighbors, and I thought that was really nice because it's not the easiest time to do public political things. So I thought that was really kind, and I thought you both did a great job, and I was. Just everyone on the team, I appreciate how much you've all put into this so far. This has been hard, and it is not actually your day jobs. So I'm thankful for all of you.
Sure, appreciate that. Mr. Helen?
Echoing a lot of what everyone else has said, kudos on the setup, the school being able to turn that over that quickly, and then, to be fair, turn it over that quickly afterwards. Like, it was amazing to see how quickly the cleanup went through. So, huge +5 to that staff. I got to hang out with the Chiefs all night, which is, if you can be in a room and hang out with the Chiefs, it's kind of the best spot anyway, because they're delightful. But the questions that we were getting were very much. There were a lot of educational questions, like, tell me how my taxes pay for trash pickup if I'm not part of the trash pickup. Like, things like that were like structural educational questions that we can help with that educational structure and sort of give them the basis of that versus what it is we're trying to do here. And then my neighbor said amazing things about everyone, which I didn't pay him for, but I should probably pay him now. And that, yeah, kudos or echoing what everyone else has said about the presentation. I thought the presentation went incredibly well. I think that people were really respectful with their questions in that room. And looking out over the sea of faces, kudos to those of us who sat stoically at the front looking concerned the entire time. But looking out over all the people that were there was a distinctive shift in the sort of, I'm annoyed that you're talking to, okay, this makes sense, like across the entire room. And so that's definitely a measure of the people that were presenting the information in a good way. So kudos to that as well.
Jan?
To echo what Patrick said, that was one of the things that really stood out to me about the night was we had a vantage point of being able to see how the audience was reacting, and there was a lot of nodding in agreement or sort of just a look of like, oh, so a lot of the information seemed to land in terms of helping maybe answer questions that people had come in with or explain something that was unknown. I did notice a lot of kind of positive, very engaged body language in the room. And, given how tense this topic is and how tense, political climates tend to be everywhere, I was incredibly proud to be in a room full of residents who approached a difficult topic with deep respect, with good intention, with curiosity, and with civility. I thought the questions that came to the microphone, again, also it is hard to get up in front of that room. I thought everybody who came up had really thoughtful questions and presented them well. And even the folks I spoke to who strongly disagree with an override or have, very sincere concerns about their ability to pay for it or about their neighbors, et cetera, those one-on-one conversations were, I felt, genuine and respectful. And I really, really appreciate that about all the people who came to speak to us, that it wasn't, just coming with an agenda to come yell at folks. And I think the setup and the structure of the evening helped lead towards that. So I hope that for anybody watching, anybody who engages in these future information sessions or seeks out information, that you understand that our intent really is to just inform and provide everybody with as much information as possible so that they can make the choice that's best for them and we know that that's the intent.
Yep.
So, and I think that night helped accomplish and kind of forward that intention.
That's cool. I would just say to all of you, if we did a good job presenting, it's a direct reflection of all the preparedness and the effort that you folks put in. I can assure you that I know when I present well in front of a lot of people, it's because I was ready for it and I know a lot of the facts, and that's candidly because this team has asked a tremendous amount of questions. Challenging, hard, I don't like this, how do we do that? I feel like I still don't know the answer to this. How can we keep scratching that? So I mean that seriously. If it was good, it was because we did a great job getting ready, and you guys played a role in that. The only other thing that wasn't new is that I did want to point out. It became clear to me that at times we, as a group or a society in general, focus on the people that are like absolutely not no, or they're just making comments, I guess, rather than engaging and helping. And I thought that meeting showed there are a lot of people out there that want to be there. They were eyes on as a speaker. They were engaging. They were nodding. Body posture was good. They weren't falling asleep. They asked good questions. So I took that to heart. That I watch Facebook and I see some of the comments and I'm like, oh, I wish there was any color to that. Like, you just don't want to do something. I get it. I get it. Like, that's okay, but it would be great if you did more. Like, could you tell me more? Why don't you want to? The other thing was just more of a conversation about value. Like, I said to a few people, I don't think I've ever said that I didn't want to pay for something or I paid too much for something that I really wanted and got value from. So what is it that you don't feel like you're getting the value from for what you're paying for? Because we buy things all the time. I buy a car every 3.5 years and that's $30,000. So like, it's not like as a society, we don't spend money. And that pivoted a little bit. Like, so I'm just sharing it in case you ever feel like somebody's just stuck of tax. I switched it to a value proposition and there wasn't an answer, but that's okay. It wasn't about that. Like, I wasn't trying to put them on the spot, but they're like, I don't think I ever really thought about that. I just looked at you as a bad thing that came out of my account in a way. Curiosity, I thought, was a good thing. The quality of the questions were good. So that was probably the new things that I would add. And otherwise, just say thank you. I mean, it was just really so well done.
I agree. I felt it was a complete team effort. I felt so supported. I felt we were all in this together and very, very professional the way the whole event ran. I also was very appreciative that the public was both civil and professional. Even when they had hard questions, everyone was kind, and people I spoke with afterward, the same thing. They voiced things that they didn't like. It allowed us to talk, and it allowed me to do that. Say, tell me more about that. Well, what would you do? And you just can't get past that if someone's not willing to talk. So that was really good. The only thing I think we should have added to the presentation, and I think we didn't do it simply because they were in our did you knows and we know it so well here, is an educator actually came up to me afterwards and said, I'd really like to know the detail what's going to happen at the schools. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like, that's been out there, those larger class sizes, but we didn't directly articulate that in the presentation. So I said thank you for that, and I believe it's April 3rd that the budget hearing will happen for the schools. So I say encourage people to come to that if you have very specific questions. And I also said I understand you're still in the process of getting some of those details in. We know some generalities, but so I hope I answered that okay. Yeah.
I did forget one thing, just to impress upon you, Connor, and certainly Dr. Cabral, the importance of the one-on-one meetings that you arranged for us where the people came in. Like, if you recall in our presentation, we were able to say, Chief Boone said this on Monday, you should have been there. Like, you should go talk to him about this. Like, it makes it real and human. Using the word embarrassing introduces an emotion to it that's valid, but being able to share it because I heard it. So having those info sessions along the way here or having the select board meetings, just thank them for their time because it enabled us to have anecdotes, even whether it was in the presentation or afterwards talking to people, to say, you should really go talk to Chief Alexander. Like, talk to him about how it works when you have to reach out to your communities for support when we don't have enough people here for ambulances and how that might affect time. You should go do that. Like, and I hope people did that. I really feel like they did when I talked to the chiefs afterwards, but that makes it real in a way we couldn't. So I just wanted to say thank you because those little extra things added up, I think, into a good part of the presentation.
I'm probably going to be super repetitive, nothing new to offer in terms of what everyone else has already said, apart from kudos to both of you for presenting so much information in a digestible way in a short amount of time. I think I can kind of piggyback off the idea that Dr. Cabral and I were in the school section, and we didn't get as many people come to us this time as we probably had, or at least because the space was smaller at Queeset House, it felt like a lot of people were milling through, but we didn't feel like we got as many questions, and I think it might also just because of the information that was presented behind us gave a lot of information, but we did have a couple people pop over and ask about the specifics, which we weren't able to give but could offer as much as we could to inform the situation, and many people were receptive and understanding and concerned, as they should be. I was really pleasantly surprised about the turnout and the thoughtful questions. It, for me, gave me hope that people weren't looking just at this moment, but were looking for the future too, and that gave me hope that, okay, we're recognizing the larger issue at play here and ways that we can potentially be proactive moving forward.
Good call.
I'd like to give a shout out to the shuttle. And it's not only because I was the first rider, but he was fantastic, and like seeing all the people come off the shuttle as they were kind of coming in, it made us like compete for who we were going to hand the flyers to.
Nice.
But I thought that was like a really nice touch to add, because it can be a bit of a walk, even though like we might not have a problem, like others do, and I thought that was really considerate of us. Walking in at 5:30, seeing what everybody had accomplished and seeing the setup. I mean, I was impressed. I thought we'd be moving chairs and doing stuff, and I was like,
Yeah.
missed the whole thing. So I thought that was really wonderful. I think like we did get a few people that like came in a little hot coming in the doors, but really that was few and far between. There were like, and I think it was just because all of this, finance is money. When you're talking about people's money, it just elicits big emotions, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's like sometimes what we kind of come face to face with. But they were, anybody that did come in a little hot, we were able to kind of like bring them back down a little bit and be like, good news. We're not doing the vote today, you know? Like, this is just informational. We're not actually pushing this down on you right now.
Good call.
And that really helped kind of allow them to take that step back. I heard just a lot of concerns for like the elders. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was wonderful that you guys put that within your presentation, all of the different services that are out there, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And that was a lot of the stuff that I was getting. I don't know if we got anybody to do the feedback on the surveys or anything. At the end, I tried to run out with like the QR code,
nice.
like to try to catch them as they were going. I got like maybe 2 that actually did the QR code, but everybody else that I asked, like, well, any feedback, any suggestions, like, and they were all like, I thought it was really well done.
Yeah. Cool.
That's all
First, I guess I would. Whoever set up the display with you guys in the middle and flanked on either side by the rest of us, I think that was very impressive for the large crowd that was there. I have to say that it was encouraging that when questions, you said it's time for questions, that you didn't have 1,000 people lining up near the microphones to ask the questions. Mm-hmm. So it appears that they understood the information. They really weren't thinking. Probably really couldn't come up with a question at the moment. I really enjoyed when you invited them to become a member of the PASE committee, nice touch. And I thought that was a positive. Here we have victory, but then I felt like it didn't really come over all that way. I think there might be more turmoil. I mean, I may be a negative point of view, but I think there was more turmoil in the crowd than you could see. I think there were a lot of people were sitting and listening, mm-hmm. but weren't going to react in any way. The people that I interacted with prior to the meeting, prior to that meeting, the concern was, how am I going to fit this in with all the other budget concerns that I have in the family? And talking about the gas bills came up more than once.
Yeah.
Especially when they're talking about, paying a finance charge on the 10% that they're going to leave off or whatever. So there are a lot of people that said, I don't have a lot of money, and I have to know how this is going to fit.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think that's one thing that we have to take into consideration.
Yeah.
But I think the meeting went really well. And I just have to say from a personal experience that once upon a time, I went to town meeting and I was presenting an article. And the question, it came up, okay, let's ask about questions. Now, who's got a question? All of a sudden, the whole crowd got up, went to the microphones, and started asking questions, and to the point that I had to be relieved by the lawyer of the. So it was a good thing that they didn't get up, and the questions really weren't very negative. There was one person who tried to get to a point. And then there also was one that I could feel a little bit of jealousy. So I think there's some jealousy out there about the salaries, about when I say, okay, we're going to do an override. Well, the first thing to do is cut this person, cut that person. And so I think that's something we have to be aware of as well.
Agreed. Yeah, it's a tough dynamic to help the residents of the community understand that there's a sense of ownership that they can employ and should employ to where we're at and to the solution that's coming. And that's different probably for a lot of people that.
But it's kind of a normal reaction. It's, you know, it's a human reaction that, you know. So.
Yeah. Dr. Brock?
Thank you. Echoing everyone else, great questions, very thoughtful. Several people did tell us that I would proactively ask people walking by, do you have any questions for the schools? And they would say, no, actually had some coming in, but the presentation answered it. As Marissa said, we partnered again in the school area, and a lot of people wanting to know what specific services were being cut, and if there's an override, what specific services are coming back.
Mm-hmm.
So really understanding and wanting to make sure that they knew if they were going to support such a thing, what value would that have for
Right, that
what
makes sense.
there would be investing. I think that was most of the questions that we received, actually. There were some misconceptions, things that people had either heard or seen, or so it was a great opportunity to give them data and information.
Sure.
So, so once again, just encouraging people to reach out, even if they think they may know an answer to something. If they're dissatisfied with it, it may actually be incorrect or incomplete, and we would love to provide more information if they have it.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you. Denise?
The benefit of going last.
To say
You
ditto.
don't have to say anything, ditto, right? Thank you for the placard where the cookies were that stated that it was not funded in a specific way. I thought that this presentation was more disarming than other presentations, that it felt more comfortable. I think I gave you a feedback, a piece where I thought that you actually completely disarmed the group by saying, and that's okay. And I think that that's a wonderful thing. We missed someone at the speaker, but Nancy and I were able to capture her. If any of you were interested, she was left at the speaker when we had ended the session, and her comment was to support the elder services, or to support the elderly. She wanted to bring up that, you know, with the ADUs, that now, you know, maybe you'd give consideration in among all the other options that exist, that, you know, maybe you rent out a space, or, you know, just kind of taking a step further. And interestingly enough, on Monday, we had some people here, and that was another common thread. So that kind of elder concern continues. So I think all in all, it was great.
There are people that have watched every one of our presentations, which is pretty impressive. Dottie, did you want to add something?
I just add one more thing about comments that we heard. We heard from a few people, and we heard again on Monday night, that some people don't feel that the override is enough, that they want it to be higher, like closer to 10 million, which I was really surprised at, because there was concern that this wouldn't be, you know, we're promoting a sustainable Easton. Would a certain level really make us sustainable, or is that just going to barely get us there this year?
Right.
I just feel like it's worth noting for people
good
that
point.
are watching that it isn't, that there's a and double down on it, like, you know.
That's a good point.
When we said we're trying to look for where the balance is between affordability and getting the job done. So I thought that was really interesting.
That's a good call. That happened on Monday, right? As well.
And happening on Monday, yeah. I
Yeah.
wanted to add to that. That was actually something that I'm seeing a shift in folks, that there's a recognition of, okay, so we have a problem today, which in and of itself is good, right? That's good that there's, I won't say unanimity, there's certainly not, but there's a lot of folks saying, okay, yeah, I get it, this is real and this is bad. There's a lot more folks now asking, and we have to solve this tonight, is, well, so what about 3 years from now? And some of those folks, it was more around policy, and that's great, but there were a meaningful amount of folks saying, looking at the presentation, looking at the per capita spend disparity that we currently have, and that even a 7.2 million would not close that gap, nor has PACE advocated for closing that gap.
Right.
There were many, there's folks who say no, we want no override, and that's perfectly fine if that's what's right for their family, though there were also folks saying, why is this not more?
Good call. Jim actually sent an article to Nancy and I, and we did share it with Amy and with Sheila as well, and Zach, that it was about the Bridgewater Raynham Teachers Union was advocating for an override. Big article in the Taunton Gazette. Collectively, theirs is just over 10 million.
For Bridgewater alone.
I thought Bridgewater was 6.7 or 7.2, and that Raynham had a 3.8, and it was a commensurate allocation between the two for the size of their offer. But I can look it up. But I know either way, it's either 10.2 or more, but it's a double digit for
30+% budget increase.
33%, right? And that was for the schools. And if you remember, they were the only, if I remember correctly, they were the only district below us in terms of spend per pupil, right?
Yes.
So
And that comes
side.
after last year's significant cuts. They had cuts, they had class sizes up to like 30 students in classes. So the town spent a year in that environment and said, this is not a good environment. So,
Chris?
And the stuff you sent us, the one from Arlington, it seemed like they have, looking for an override before the real crush of inflation. And so they just had a little bit, but they promised no override, another override for a number of years. Do you know what, did Arlington vote for this? I mean, it almost sounded like, the way I read it, the way it came across is that they would go for an override, but it wouldn't satisfy the need a couple of years later, because that's when the medical insurance, went to 25%, and the inflation hit really hard. And so that is germane to the questions you have, is that Arlington tried to do that with an override, but did in fact it worked because the context changed a year or two into the override. So we don't know what's really going to happen with the environment that we're in now. It could get worse, right?
Yeah.
Seems like it passed.
It did.
Arlington residents, according to Arlington's website, voted favorably on 2 ballot questions. Question 1 was a Prop 2.5 override of 7 million.
That's correct. The DOR portal. So Arlington has passed
2, 3, 4, 5 in a row.
Yeah, 5 overrides in a row: 91, 2006, 2012, 2020, 2025.
So that's their method, is do one a year.
It's not every year, but I think you bring up a really good point, Chris, and it's one we've talked about, I think, indirectly before, that we need to make sure that everyone, I hope everyone agrees after spending this much time on, is and a lot of folks have expressed almost a certain amount of despair about the fact that just the structure that's set up is inherently not going to be sustainable. One of the people who was asking, well, why don't you just make it a bigger number, because I don't have to worry about this for 10 years. And I said, I'm sorry, there's no way that you'll not, right? And that's the kind of burden we have as citizens in our own communities, because the structure is set up and that's why the override there. It's a pressure relief valve, right? That doesn't mean it's not painful, but that is why it's baked into the law. And there are some communities that don't have very, very large commercial bases that have residents who expect a high quality of services, and that you need to have overrides regularly to fund that. And that's the trade-off. That's why you have some communities that have passed 5 since we passed the last one.
Right. Dr. Cabral?
Just having conversations with people also, I am encouraged about people focusing on long-term solutions as well, which is the second half of the conversation, because the overrides alone can't be expected to be the solution. And PACE is certainly not advocating for that, but for residents to be more understanding that the decisions that they make have direct financial implications and influence things like the considerations of overrides or services, and not necessarily thinking that, a Taco Bell, for example, has nothing to do with how many kids are in a class. And hopefully that is something that will continue, and people will decide whatever they decide, but do it knowing what the long-term impact is going to be on them. And when I talk to people about that, you know, they feel kind of helpless, or why did you do this, or why aren't you doing that? And they realize, well, as a resident, I have the agency to do that. I have the agency to make those decisions. I've never been to town meeting, or I hadn't weighed in on that decision, and hopefully people are more aware that they have the ability to do that. And it's not easy to get out and do that and go to meetings and go to even town meeting. But it is the way to sort of, you know, avoid these revenue deficits long term, and maybe people will look at things a little bit differently when they're making decisions.
Sure. Yeah, it was a lot of decisions that got us here. A lot. Okay, if there's no further feedback, then I would just look to move to agenda item 2. Agenda item 2 is finalizing override and expense recommendations. Just to lead into this real quick, I have had a lot of questions about why would you possibly come up with 7.2 and 0.8? And like, they're not happy that it's these two numbers, and like, just make it 8, like make it an override. And what I did share with them is that it reflects the democracy of 19 people. And, you know, it's very hard to arrive at a specific number that drives consensus. So that's my feedback, just that, and then I share how close we all are in terms of the size of the challenge, which is, again, that's huge. Like if it was 3 and 15, that's how you average to 8, that's different than almost everybody was between 7 and 9. So that says a lot. And so that's just so that you guys know how I'm explaining it when I get asked that question, that, look, I think it speaks to the fact that we know we have to still save expenses as we go through these years. That will never go away. And I think we're realizing that. Even with this override, depending upon how you did your model in that worksheet, but you're either in trouble at the end of year 2, you might make it to year 3 if you tweak some of the assumptions. But either way, for most, I think, and somebody can say no, but I think around year 4, either way, we start to kind of be challenged again, which means all the initiatives you're going to put into place about new growth have to sprout fruit, all those seeds planted by year 3. Or you're having a discussion about reductions again, or utilization of stabilization funds and all that. So just letting you know how I explain it, because people don't really get it. But then when I explain there's 19 people here that are talking, they're like, oh, I get it. And plus they pay homage to the fact that we are still advocating expense thoughtfulness. It's probably a good way to say it, at all turns. So I don't have a change to mine. Does anybody have a change to theirs? If you do, that's completely okay. As we said, we're trying to make a recommendation based upon our charge, not necessarily what we think will ultimately get put forth on a warrant or be voted on. So I would just pause there. Is everybody good?
I think the difference between 7.2 and 8 is negligible from my tax standpoint. It's less than $100 a year, but the impact to the big bucket of money that we need is significant. Yeah. So I would be willing to bring it to 8. Yeah.
Gotcha. So
Same here.
Okay. Anybody else?
I was at 8 to begin with, continue to believe.
Yeah.
You know, I will
I was
of course
8.
advocate
I was
for
2.
wherever we get to. You know, it's a democratic process.
Does anybody feel very strongly not to do that? So, are we saying we want to take a vote as a committee that we want to recommend an override, and then the vote of 8 million, and then the vote is whatever it is? And as long as the majority carries, that's what we put in the recommendation? Or do we want to do averages?
I have a question first.
Please.
So the 0.8, so we're talking about 800,000, right?
Yep.
What effect will that have on services?
Quite a bit.
If you're using an average salary and that's what you're doing. So there's a couple ways to answer your question. First of all, I'm not sure we know what the first $800,000 will do, but if you're using $150,000 average salary, I'm not saying that's right or wrong.
It's not.
100?
Just to be clear from folks at home.
100, I think we use.
Like 100 is a safe estimate.
Okay, so we'll use 100, so it would be roughly 7 people if you factored in the 20% increase of payroll taxes, benefits, and all the other good things that come with having a person.
Well, I expressed the first time, is I think it's a shared demise, not only to the residents, but to people who are semi-residents by being employed. The difficulty is for those who are employed by the town and are also residents. Then that's a double hit. But I would not that I would say that it's that you're buying votes for the override, but if you say that the pain is going to be shared by all involved, it may garner some votes.
Sure. So you prefer an average approach?
I think that the residents would feel possibly, this is just my
That's
my
okay. No,
feeling,
I'm just asking
my feeling,
your
that-
opinion.
That the residents would feel that the problem is being shared by everybody. And everybody also includes, as I said before, that the employees are part of the covenant, part of the town as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so the voters can say, well, why do I have to? I am barely making my ends meet, and yet they're going to continue, or they're going to get a raise, and I have to, those types of things. That is just, and if you have something, it's just a thought. If you have something, not $1 million, not $2 million, not $3 million, but
So you're, of the two approaches, which is one, we vote for one number, and wherever the committee votes, either yea or nay, the motion carries based upon a majority, or it's we just go with the average responses.
Well,
and
you
yours
just
is
asked for an opinion.
yeah, yours is of the average. You want the average because the average gets you some give back. So, which I respect. That's a good call. Does Patrick?
Procedural question, just because it came up at the FinCom meeting last night, and I realized my ignorance was part of this, is that I understand what we're doing, right? I understand that the recommendation is going to obviously be something presented. That recommendation is then going to be reviewed, let's say. But the actual process, if the select board and administration decides this is the next step, we're going to go forward with an override, regardless of what our recommendation does. Just to put as fine a point on it as possible, what are the steps involved there? Because this is something that came up when we were in the FinCom meeting, that we might say yes, right? I can't remember, Dottie might have said it before, like if we say go for 12, if we say go for 15, whatever it is that we say, that's advisory. And then the actual process of saying, thanks so much for your time and effort, and the 7,000 hours of meetings, this is what we're going to go forth, and this is how we're going to process that. What does that actual process look like as someone that has not been through this yet?
So good news for you, we've never done PASE before, so I can't answer that.
Not the PACE side, sorry,
Yeah.
Literally the override side.
No, I get it.
I understand that we're
probably shouldn't be
breaking ground
too
and being
bad.
amazing.
So realistically, I can't speak for the board, but we are trying to remove ambiguity, right? Because we're in this weird spot right now where we have advanced a lot of parts of the budget much sooner than we typically would, and we thankfully have a lot of folks engaging way sooner. Like more people went to that open house than at many of our town meetings, and that's months ahead of town meeting, which is great. So as folks are coming along, like you're talking about, they're saying, okay, there's a problem. Like, what exactly are the steps and who's doing what? And so on Monday last week, as part of my giving an update on the budget, I asked the board, the select board, and I recommended to them, and they did, vote to basically declare, and Dottie, correct me if I'm misquoting, but that it is their intention to put forward to the voters an override if that's what PACE recommends.
Okay.
Okay, so that has been declared publicly at this point. And it will be up to voters. And so what that will look like is that we will have a town meeting on May 19th that will have two budgets to pick from. One will be a balanced budget that is balanced through substantial, north of 2 million probably, in cuts to town and school services, if not more. Substantial use of reserves, but without an override, right? We have to produce that budget. So Dr. Cabral and I are working on that now. I'm have begun iterating on it for the town side publicly. And then as far as the override budget, the schools will have a balanced budget proposal at their April 3rd hearing. And then we have a hearing with the finance committee. I think we're still buttoning up last details, but I think it will be April 29th.
29th, yep.
So the charter in Easton requires that there is a hearing on the proposed budget that's going before town meeting at least 2 weeks before the town meeting with the select board and the finance committee. By that hearing, I think realistically, and again, I'm not trying to be like bureaucratic and overly hedged. There's not like a specific process you must follow. I think it makes a lot of sense that by that hearing, which is the total budget, right? It's not the, I don't want to say just the schools, obviously very important. It's whatever budget the school committee ultimately votes following their hearing, whatever last pieces, hopefully none, after the school budget is adopted, the town has to put a balanced budget forward. We will have that hearing, and I would intend, assuming we get PASE's recommendation this month, that there's, at that hearing, you have the two budgets already, right? So one would be a budget that's balanced through cuts and reserves, and the other would be an override contingent budget. Folks who are saying, well, what exactly does that look like? Myself and Dr. Brawl have not been able to answer that because we don't have PASE's number, right? We will tonight, I hope, and that's going to inform some pre-work that we get going.
But the recommendation is the recommendation separate from the number? In other words, whether we say 7.2 or 8, does the select board makes the determination
Right,
if
that's
it's
essentially
5
what
or
I'm
15, right?
Ultimately, the select board has the legal final authority on calling for the election for the ballot, and part of the requirements from the Department of Revenue are that the select board has to lay out the dollar amount at the time that the election is called.
So that's the step that I think I wanted to make sure I identified perfectly.
Yes.
Like, yes, we have a recommendation we're going to put forward. If we do it tonight, great. But here's a number we're saying based on research and engagement. But that is not immediately great stamp. Move that on to the next piece.
Right.
It is still a decision and discussion, deliberation from the select board itself, given all this information, right? Not in a vacuum. But that is a separate step then. Just
And we'll be
accepting what we said.
preparing budgets based on the recommendation, just so that we have
Correct.
something to go
Yeah,
by.
here's
But
something
it
to run.
could totally have adjustments again,
Right.
should the school committee in town to decide to go in a different direction.
Yeah. And so, Dottie, do you want to?
Connor, can you also talk about the vote and the time frame for that?
Yeah, so
ballot
thank
vote?
you. So that's another thing that we're trying to balance here is, so town meeting is carved in stone. It's the third Monday in May. We back everything out from that. Your hearings have to be at least 2 weeks
14
prior
weeks,
to that.
14 days, yeah.
Right? The ballot itself, right? So for an override to pass, it needs to be voted yes at two places. One is at town meeting, and then this next is at a ballot. Under the law, the select board has to vote to call for the election at least 35 days before the election, right? For appropriate notice and things like that. So you can, the board is going to have to make a decision, and if PACE has an opinion, we're happy to hear from it. But we have a lot of very important factors to consider, right? Which is, if the board waits until after town meeting, the 19th, to even schedule an election, that puts you in the last, functionally, 3 or 4 days of fiscal 25 before July.
Before July, yeah.
That is an option. That makes this more protracted. That also increases the time between layoff notices and people getting to make a decision, which I personally do not think is good. What we have typically done in Easton with debt exclusion votes is the town meeting would be on a Monday, and then the election is usually within a week or two after that. That's complicated because we have Memorial Day, but if the board, and again, if PACE wants to share opinions, it is ultimately the board's decision. If the board or PACE wanted that election to be close to after town meeting, then the select board would need to vote to call that election before town meeting.
Right.
Does that make sense?
What day is town meeting on?
Monday, May 19th.
19th? Okay. So I'm just doing the back
Contingent
counting.
on a successful vote at town meeting. The taxpayers still have the
Correct.
say of whether it goes to ballot or not, regardless of the select board's decision, correct?
Well, no, because at a certain point, if once the election's been called, the election is happening. So, but if it fails at either one of those votes, it doesn't go into effect.
Right.
Right, so if it fails at town meeting, you have the election, it's booked, people can still vote, but absent calling another town meeting to try to reappropriate the funds.
Correct.
But yes, it is ultimately going to be the voter's choice. And so there's a balance between, do you wait until after town meeting to even call the election? Again, I've shared how I personally feel about that. I don't think that's in the best interest of the operations of the schools or the town. I also have consistently received feedback from people that there's folks tuning in at all times, which is great, and getting on board. But once people tune in, the next thing they want to know is, what are the dates I need to know, and when can we start making decisions as a community?
Sure.
So
The other thing with that is looking at the calendar. So if we do it on the longer end, the first week of June it would be a Saturday, right? The vote is school graduation.
Right.
And the next Saturday is the tricentennial,
Flag Day at the schools.
a big picnic at the schools. And then if it goes too far, aside from the fact of how we feel about letting people know, especially if they do get layoff notices, the closer we get to the end of June, the less people are going to be around to vote. And we don't want people to think this is how it was done so that people wouldn't have the chance. We want to make sure that we hear from people at the
Agreed.
polls, right?
Yep.
The whole community should weigh in. So I think that scheduling it closer to the town meeting is probably the better benefit for people.
Sure.
So you'd have to call for it mid-April at that point.
So I'm just going to bring us back, if that's okay, because I think it's important that we get the calendarization.
Just
but
one clarifying question. The ballot vote has to be done in person, right? So you need people to show up to
The
vote.
town meeting vote is in person.
Town meeting is-
No, but like when you have to come and vote for
which? For
the override. If
not
the
split
There's
hairs,
two
it's-
votes.
So
no, I know. So if the town meeting votes to have an election, like a ballot,
Paper
vote,
ballot.
paper ballot, do the people have to show up to do it? Because that's also my concern too.
you can absentee vote or vote
Okay.
by mail in all town elections in Easton,
Okay,
including
just making
overrides.
sure that
Yeah,
was.
but only the ballot vote, the election, there's no absentee voting at
Right,
town.
you
meeting.
have to show up at town meeting, but
meeting, you can
there are
only vote
other
in person.
options for people to vote.
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
We do have absentee and vote by mail for all elections in Easton, including
Okay.
local.
I'm going to bring us back, if that's okay, just to solve the question at hand. The two options that I see before us, one are to literally take the averages of everybody's responses, which we have been utilizing up till now. That gets you 7.2 and 0.8. Or to pick a specific override number and to socialize that. Jocelyn?
I'm struggling with the 0.8. Like, what's the benefit of including that? Because it kind of sounds like we are saying, well, let's have the 0.8 there so that people see that Easton is still making sacrifices.
Sure.
But Easton is still making sacrifices because this isn't a $15 million override. And I kind of feel like almost 7 people are going to lose their jobs so that we can have a better chance at winning the, I don't know, like, are we including the 0.8 so that we feel like we have a better chance of getting a vote of yes? Because I don't know if that should be driving our decision.
So I can give you mine. So I'm actually for it. I'm for keeping it. And the reason is, one, I think it pays homage to the people that feel very strongly that it shouldn't be an $8 million override. And I respect that.
Because
it's just an
that
opinion.
sounds too high.
No, they're people, these are your fellow peers, so you can
Yeah.
ask them, but I actually
Right.
voted for an $8 million override, so I can't speak for them. The other reason why I think it matters is because that's $89 for somebody a year, for every $1 million. And while it doesn't sound like a lot, like, to me, we're gonna have to find nickels to give back to people over time. Like, we've given them $1,840 in electrical savings. I think that's fantastic. I don't think most people even know that. But to me, I think it just pays homage to the fact that we need to continue to find ways to run in a lean way, because we literally ask our residents to bear an overdue burden. We all want it. We all ask for it. We got what we asked for. But I'm just respectful that we are in a community that people actually have to pay more.
Yeah,
And-
it is tough because on one hand, it sounds like we're hearing this should be a $10 million override, and then on the
Yeah.
other 8 is too much. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a balance.
I
So
think
to me,
maybe
I
when
just like the
we
Democratic.
put a cost calculator online to look at it.
We
that-
will.
That might help people see the difference if it's,
Yep.
but but we're gonna have to pick a number before that.
So the reality is we're just saying, the good news is, team, that we're splitting hairs to a large degree. Like 7.2 or 8, we're right there. I like it for both what I think it represents, which is we need to continue to be thrifty. I like it because it represents a democratic vote and averages everybody's number together. But that's my thought. So I happen to be in that camp. Jim?
I'd be happy to add, because I feel like I was probably an advocate for bigger cuts in general. I look at it from the longer term view that as hard as it is, I do agree with some of what Chris said in terms of sharing the overall problem. But I also look at it as what are our biggest drivers of costs, and I know it may sound cold, but this helps slow, I think, this snowball that we're going to see over the next 5 years, as harsh as that sounds, or 10 years, or X number of years, where health insurance costs are constantly going up. If the biggest costs in our budget are people, and in theory could just buy us time as well in terms of making cuts as hard as they may be. I don't know if that helps.
So what are you for? The averaging? Putting in some expense reduction?
Yes, yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, but hopefully that was another perspective on why.
Yeah, I get it, yeah. So can we do the average, or will somebody fall on the sword and say, I really want it to be one number, 8 million, and that's it?
I'm a hard 8. That's
Got it.
just me. Well,
So do you want me to call a vote so that
and
we
my reason,
can pick?
the lack of sustainability is a gift that is going to pay a royalty in perpetuity to this town. And we can slow it down. I'm an 8, and I would like to see some adjustments, cuts, what have you as well. But the reality is there are so many unforeseens within a town budget that we just can't say, hey, we fixed this problem, let's move on. I think anything more than 8, while would be great for the town, is not a realistic figure for anybody in town, or anything that could get passed, and even 8 might be a stretch. That said, the difference financially between 7.2 and 8 million is a factor of money, but it's not, like to echo what Dottie said, it will benefit us for sustainability a heck of a lot more than what it costs a household, if I'm wording it right. So, and as a matter of fact, I was asked over the past week, 3 separate occasions, like, oh, you were the first one to say 8 on the PASE committee and everything, and why did you say that? And I said, it's a number that I thought might be achievable, but it has a little bit of sustainability with it too. And that's kind of why, like, I mean, I'll make a motion for 8, because I'll stand by what I said, but.
Well, first we're gonna vote for the methodology. So all those in
my bad.
favor of just using the average, and therefore it would be 7.2 and 0.8, raise your hand. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Sorry. I feel like yes to the average, but maybe after discussions, there's a new average? Does that make sense?
I'm just asking for a process.
For just the average?
Just the average.
So, okay,
Even if
not
it's not
tied to
7.2.
those numbers.
Right,
Okay, sorry. Okay.
okay. So I'm for an average. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that feels like that carries the majority, right? How many do we have here? 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so we're going to use the average. So the average is 7.2 and.
Sorry, just for minutes. So 9 said yes, but we need to get the no's.
Oh, sorry. All those that vote no? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Got it.
But if
Please.
I may, Jocelyn, I think what Jocelyn is saying, and I might be feeling this from other people too, is it's fine to do the average, but if they adjust their particular vote, will that change that averaging a little? And are we going to go through that
We're
process?
going to do that right now.
Okay, I'm sorry.
okay.
Because when you said the 7.2 and the
Right.
0.8 again, I think people were thinking
Nope,
that's the number.
We
Okay.
still haven't got, right, that was
A
just
new
the
average.
math, right.
Thank you.
Jen, do you want to change your numbers? Got it. Jim, do you want to change your numbers?
No.
Got it. Actually, I'm going to say them. Jen was 8 all revenue. Jim was 8.25, 6.25 revenue, and 2 from expense. Great. Wendy, you are 7.9, playing The Price is Right. Still sticking with that number,
Wendy, you were $1.
right?
Sure.
Okay. Denise, you are 8 all override.
Same.
Same. Dottie, you are 8 all override. Same.
I feel like I might want to go up to 10 just to average it up a little.
Same.
But I,
Whatever you, again, I would just ask
scared
you
me.
to
I wanna
do
go up.
whatever the information leads you to believe you should do.
I feel strongly about 8.
Okay. Tom Broussard is an 8 all revenue. Chris, you had an 8 all revenue. Same? Keeping it?
Well,
That Chris.
Oh, sorry.
this Chris? Yeah.
Chris Mills.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Marissa, you were an 8 all revenue.
Wait, yes, yes.
Got it. Kathy, you were an 8, but 4 and 4. Keeping that?
Yep.
Okay. Chris, you were an 8, 7.5, and 0.5.
If you say so.
Good. The minutes shall reflect. Nancy, you were an 8 all
All in.
revenue.
Same, please.
Jocelyn, you were a 7 all revenue.
Oh. Okay, well, I'll be an 8.
Okay.
I thought I was an 8.
Patrick, you were an 8 all revenue.
Yep.
Okay.
Sticking with it.
So that makes it 7.3 million of revenue, 0.8 for expense, for an $8.1 million total recommendation of challenge. So the challenge is 8.1. We're recommending a $7.3 million override. Got it. So we'll take a vote on that.
So moved.
So now I've made the number weird and not round.
That's okay.
Yep.
Hey, it's not
Don't
like
like
you,
that.
you didn't make it 7.9 like Wendy
Odd
did.
numbers aren't weird.
No.
It's all good. It's whatever the information led you to
I have
believe.
regret.
So I'll take a motion to recommend that the town pursue a $7.3 million operational override. And I would also just put the language in that we acknowledge there's an $8.1 million total challenge. And we are recommending that $0.8 million of that challenge be resolved with a focus on expenses.
So moved.
Second.
Ellen and
Second.
Donahue, going around the room. Denise? I can start the other way if you want.
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Cabral?
Yes.
Yes.
Sure? Okay. You sure what we're
Well,
voting
I'm just
for?
looking at Connor because I don't know if we vote on this.
I mean, we're voting members. We've abstained from a conversation of what we think the numbers should be. I mean, there's no hard and fast rule. I'm comfortable
Okay.
with it.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
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 No.
Okay. So the motion carries with a 13-2 vote. Next up is the community compact, policy or other commitments to voters. Yeah.
Okay. First of all, thank you all for your close reading and very thoughtful responses to those articles. And it was noted by so many people that those pledges from those other communities were very specific to those communities and might not completely translate to Easton, but we did the best we could to put some categories together. So the spreadsheet has got a couple of updates since I'm sitting here now. So hopefully, if I've done that properly, you should see your data on there. So the first thing I would ask is for people to look at that with the lens. Is there anything that we missed on the top? Is there anything?
Excuse me, do you want to share your screen?
You're asking a lot now. How do I do that? Do I have to go plug in?
John
Right?
will help
There should
you.
be
Can you
just
do that?
a plug.
Sean will help.
Sean, oh, Sean.
Sorry, Sean.
Okay.
Thank God for Sean.
Dottie, I thought
Thank
you were
you,
the tech
Sean.
researcher. I don't understand.
I just learned a new thing.
Sorry.
Sorry, no.
I knew I would be
No.
in the way.
No,
I called it.
Oh, are you coming over to me?
Yeah, let me just make sure that you got, what's the other side?
Marissa has it up on her computer too.
That does help.
She doesn't have an HDMI port.
Yeah, just make sure you close everything out.
I literally just have that one browser open.
Don't want to show the ELA test
I
next
don't
week.
know, or Aspen
Yeah,
grades
yeah.
open.
PACE helping the community,
Oh, you had an HTML.
getting kids good grades.
You do have an HTML
Yeah.
on your side, so.
This side?
Yeah. You might need to
Do I
switch
switch
spots, Marissa.
I did not say menu.
Hey, Dottie, take it away.
I did not say menu style.
I know, it's so tight in here,
Coming
with our
down.
luggage underneath.
One of the things is when it,
Oh,
like, none of
are you still getting out of that? Sorry. Oh, God.
like the first two meetings.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Because I realized that's not.
Sorry, Chris.
I suppose I
Might be able to just change the display
push this
settings
through.
on. Just go to the,
The whole thing.
That's my road.
That's
I don't know what that is.
Wish it wasn't, but
no, it's not.
That's any road that
People
connects to
on-
Brockton at 2 a.m. That's pretty much what it looks like.
no.
Oh, yes, thank you.
No, I'm
Sorry
doing
about
fine.
it.
I'm just gonna probably get spot at least.
not familiar with this interface, so. We could put it on my computer. Or can you email it to me, just because I'm not familiar with this and I don't
Show
want
you
to.
wasn't the only person not on today's. Yep, I'm sorry about
No, it's okay.
Tom, do we want to take a 3-minute break?
Yeah, that would be
Get some
great.
water and
Nothing worse than, yeah, nothing worse than-
It's 7:40. Why don't we take a 5-minute break? 7:45. Mics are on.
I like it.
As always, Joe, we're taking a break. Thank you, sir.
Ran heaters and like.
All right, we are back, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for joining again for the PACE committee. We just took a quick recess for a break, and we had some tech sharing of screen going on, and we have it. So, Nancy, I'll let you take it away for everybody at home, and for here, we are on agenda item 3 about the community compact, policy or other commitments to voters.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So this spreadsheet represents a summary and compilation of all of the work that committee members did in reading those articles. And I sent this all to all of you today as well, so if you prefer to look at them on your own screens, you might find that easier. It's not the most readable thing, but it was difficult. You captured so much detail, and there's what we'd like to do are 2 things. First, I just want you to look at the top and see if there's anything missing from there that I didn't capture in your detail. There's some checkbox that's totally missing or category from the top. And then we'd like to go around and sort of have you each present what you thought, because we put these in categories, but you added so much more detail and color, and to sort of clarify those. You also have the opportunity at this time, now that you see some of these other great ideas, to say, yes, I also vote for this, this, and this, and this. It was cheating for me, because when the great ideas came again, I was able to do that and add to that. Are there any other agenda items that you think we need to cover in that? I think that will do it. So is it okay to just, Tom, maybe you don't want to start at the top. Should I start with, you're okay to start? Okay.
Well, now that you said don't start at the top, the name was at the top, Nancy, I have to, I'm in. No, I'm happy to start.
Thank you.
So these are not universal statements, meaning like there's like 7 words up there. So I, in general, support, without question, new growth. I think that's very important. I think we have to look at our conservation guidelines. We have to look at our zoning guidelines. I think it's very important we do so in a way that doesn't take away from what makes Easton special. So I just want to be very clear for all the voters, whoever hears this, that I'm not looking to change the fabric of Easton, but I am looking to see that if there are some less impactful adjustments we can make to drive new growth, that would be helpful. So that's what the first 2 is, just to understand those. And I think we should stand up a committee to do that, to make sure it has accountability, it has to come back with answers, and it has to meet with the planning, the conservation commission, so that you can get their buy-in and their support and their feedback. You're a fast scroller. Moratorium guidelines for acquisition of new land or for passive preservation. So I think we need to come up with guidelines. That's why I like the guidelines. I'm not for a straight up just stop. But we have 1/3 of our land that's not taxable. So I think we need to consider what that impact is on the taxpayer. New construction, I think I covered in my previous. I am a fan of committing to no debt exclusion projects and no override for X number of years that we would debate and come to a consensus on. But I believe in making that commitment. I also believe in making sure it is heavily caveated. So I mentioned this and somebody said, how could you possibly do that? Like, what if blank happens? Well, this isn't to eliminate considerations for safety, state mandates, things like that. So I would make sure we have to heavily caveat it. I'm not here to handcuff the people who run our town, but I am here to feel pretty strongly about all things being equal. I think we have to commit to not looking for those overrides. I'm all for educating and pursuing opportunities to minimize the impacts. I just didn't hit my top 5 because I just think we have to do that. So maybe I should have put it in. Please don't think I don't think that. I think just as a course of business, these next ones you should do, like adjust the bond. You should do that every year. You should seek efficiencies, including service deliveries. You should do that every year. The hires, I'm just flexible on that. Like I would rather govern it by at the end where we say like a potential X% increase and give the latitude to the people that have to staff to figure out the right ways to do that. I just felt like I wasn't informed enough to do that there. That's where I checked the annual growth cap box. I think town boards have to make a stand. So I believe the select board, they'll obviously be putting anything forward. I think the school committee has to vote, which you all have been participating. I think the finance committee has to make their feelings heard. So I think that's really important. I think we can't just spend down our reserves and kill our bond rating. So that's just good fiscal business. Definitely regionalized services where possible. I don't know if we can become the first county in Massachusetts of services. I highly doubt that, but somewhere happened, and I didn't see that 10 years ago. So
Right.
it's just look for opportunities wherever that is. Annual review, upcoming budget meetings, advanced goals, PACE compact. That felt like a natural. This is one. So to me, healthcare costs and personnel costs are something that I go to in my budget process for my private companies first. Usually human capital is the single largest expense, depending upon the company I've been at. And for us, we have an incredibly high amount of cost. I've seen cost sharing be every different type of split. Some of this is negotiated by contracts, by the way, so there's that to be considering. But we also have historical or those people that are retired, but they also are covered. So I don't know what the answer is here, but I think you have to look at every one of those stones. Whether it's current people who are paying into it, whether it's people that are retired that are paying into it, whether the GIC doesn't work anymore. I'm not saying that, by the way. I'm just saying that I think every year you have to go to market. We always did. I think we do anyways.
Every 2 years, yeah.
Right? So, but it went up 10% last year. We thought it was going to be 11. I think I've heard it's worse than that.
It
so,
is. No.
Like, those are just numbers that will always be in trouble. Like, I just feel like you have to look at every stone, and that's a big one for us because it has a very large dollar impact.
We're going to be talking about that at Monday's select board meeting.
Perfect. I think you have to actively lobby, so please don't take this as don't. But like you have to keep going and asking for state aid, and we have to keep going and asking for more roadway support and unrestricted government aid. And that was it. Notes from many in the event of extraordinary. Yeah, exactly.
I think that's what you addressed,
Yeah.
is not tying hands. Many people said that, and that's language that's commonly used to describe that. So.
Yep.
Anything else, Tom?
No,
Thank you.
that was it. I just I feel very passionate about this because I believe this is our commitment to the people that we're asking to pay when they really can't afford, and that they deserve as much as we can do that. I would love to just strengthen that so that they see where we are forming a partnership with them and making commitments to them.
Okay. Thank you.
So we're going around the-
Jocelyn, do you
Not want to go?
Oh, okay.
Goodbye.
Wow, is that something I said? And I'm sorry if I didn't capture something from you on here. Is it?
No, I did not do the homework in time.
Okay.
I don't have a good excuse at all.
Okay, but are there a few things that resonate with you here that you want to speak
Yes,
about?
I did look at this, just I didn't make the
It's okay.
deadline. I'm
It's
sorry
okay.
about that.
You have such a nice teacher voice like that. It's okay if you didn't do your homework. Just don't go out for recess, Jocelyn.
Can't see. I did have a couple notes because I looked at this. Just on the spreadsheets, the ones that really stood out to me, column B, the established pro-growth advisory committees. I mean, just in general, things that stood out. I think it might have been the Franklin one, but just the sentiment of it doesn't end with this. I think we've all said it 1,000 times, but to form some kind of committee or just have some kind of commitments that additional sources of revenue need to be found. And then also the no override for X number of years. That was interesting to me. I didn't really think about that. I mean, I don't know a lot about overrides and towns that do them, so I've been learning a lot reading this. But I do think that would definitely help people feel better about it. It certainly would make me feel better about it. And then the one next to that, educate and pursue opportunities to minimize impact. I mean, we've talked a lot about, there's a lot of concern about, the elderly and those in need. So those were just the ones that stood out the most to me.
Thank you. Any other comments or things that are missing on the spreadsheet as a category, or?
No, but I'm looking forward to hearing everyone else's.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Donnie, who's next? Okay. So, and I feel like the first sort of three columns, B, C, and D, are kind of related. People talked about growth in general. They talked about the relationship between conservation restrictions, so some redundancy there. I did not check off the new land for passive preservation, though I didn't check off that one. Relaxing permits, I see that as very much tied to the relief on construction and growing, being able to grow more. I did check off the no debt exclusion and no override for something of years that we need to decide, and also the educate and pursue opportunities and impact too. At first it was just seniors, and then many folks added the veterans and individuals with disabilities. I thought that was really excellent to include that. And then finally, what else do I have here? Department managers to seek budget and efficiencies. Again, the new hires were sort of tagged on there as someone suggested that. And then annual growth caps and endorsements by the town boards. I think that's maybe just automatically a part of these pledges, but a lot of folks were very careful to identify that. Protecting our reserves, shielding our bond ratings, also important. And then finally, this active lobbying at the state level is something I'd really like to understand more about. We talked a little bit about this Monday, how Connor said how it's so difficult too, because the State House will often just give a couple of days notice, and it's sort of difficult. They don't sort of have an open door policy to go in there, but I would be interested in getting involved in that. And then finally, someone added grants. I think that was Denise, your most recent one.
Excuse me, Nancy, I'm so sorry. Joe, we're getting a comment that there's no sound.
Oh, geez.
Can you check on that?
Is it just?
Is it our Zoom thing? Oh, there we go.
Is it just me?
Sorry.
We were muted.
Are we fixed?
Are we good?
Yes, all good, thank you.
Thank you to our external IT team.
Yes. Okay, sorry. But that was also another thought. I know we talked about grants at the beginning of this and how Easton does such a great job of obtaining grants. So I took that to just mean continuation of that. And that's what I have. So Jim, Jim, I hope I captured these. I'm not sure if I did them perfectly, but you start out.
Unlike Jocelyn, I did do my homework about 3 hours ago.
Okay.
So I did send a copy to Nancy, but I don't know if it got.
Well, I tried. You have this one about regionalized services. Is that
Yes, there are
true?
a few other ones. I do have a copy of mine up. So if you don't mind, can I just start from the left all the way on the left?
Yes.
Okay. I did check off established pro-growth advisory committees, land use and infrastructure. I did check off review conservation restrictions. I did also check off a moratorium / guidelines for acquisition of new lands for passive preservation. I thought that was relatively consistent with column C. Some of these I did want maybe clarification on what it means to relax permits, but I do feel like if this is in line with what Chris Mills has said before about streamlining the permitting process or making us more in line with state requirements rather than being above them, I would agree with that. Allow ADUs, column F. I guess I'm under the impression that's already.
It is. Yeah, just to be clear, that's allowed by state law now in all residential zones.
I was looking at the website and it hadn't specified specifically what it was. So
Okay. We'll check that.
Okay.
We just adopted our local bylaw in November, and I think it's still being reviewed by the Attorney General, so we may not have updated our code.
Okay.
But it's state law, very recent state law,
Okay.
last year. Now ADUs are allowed in all residential zones in Massachusetts.
Do you think we should remove that then from a?
It's redundant.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
what
it's
I mean.
fair that as soon as we get the update from the Attorney General, we'll make sure it's in the code and folks know. But yeah, ADUs are allowed in all residential zones, accessory dwelling units.
Okay. Let's remove it because otherwise it's confusing. It looks like we have an opportunity to say yes or no, and that's not what we're saying. Okay. Sorry, Jim.
No, that's all right. No debt exclusion projects and no override for X number of years, I do agree with, although we definitely have to specify what X is.
Right.
Educate and pursue opportunities to minimize impacts on seniors, veterans, individuals with disabilities, I checked. Column L, department managers seek budget efficiencies, including deliveries, no new hires. I did check that, but I would think we should discuss maybe more in detail what new hires means for specific units or types of new hires. I think that matters. Annual growth caps, town and schools. I generally agree with that idea, but would want to know if there's a best practice when making that decision. What is that type of cap and what's sustainable? Is the protect, reserve, shield bond rating. I checked. Column P, regionalized services where possible. I do agree with that. Column Q, annual review, upcoming budget meets advances goals of the PASE compact. Move the column. Yeah, sorry, Nancy. For people following along.
Yeah, thank you. I was struggling with doing the updates on this, so that's why I'm.
Sorry.
No, thank you, thank you.
Do you want me to move it?
No, I think it's fair.
Annual review of upcoming budgets meets the PACE compact. I did agree with that. Review long-term healthcare costs, cost share annually. I didn't originally have that checked, but I think Tom's explanation just made a lot of sense. Seems like it's already standard, which is good. So I did agree with that. Active lobbying, I just wasn't sure if that was something the town, I assume our committees are already doing it, but I don't know if as a town we can endorse a certain position or advocate or ask our citizens to make some sort of committee, but so I didn't specifically check that, but I think it makes a lot of sense depending on who is doing it. And then I did agree with the general caveat at the end that if there are extraordinary circumstances, that there are procedures in place to do an override sooner if we needed to. Two things that I did try to add that were not originally on. I don't know if this is doable, but I wanted to put the ideas out there that the town and schools look to invest in IT software services that may reduce repetitive tasks, streamline repetitive tasks, kind of help existing town employees streamline their processes, or emphasize that effort. I'm sure it's already happening to some extent. And then I did add, look into expanding the tax work-off program, whether that means lowering the age requirements or increasing the number of people that could potentially apply for it. If there are single income households or people who are 50 plus or meet certain income requirements. And I also did say, if it is not done already, the minimum income requirements should be tagged to inflation in some way or adjusted more frequently. Like I think right now it's 60,000 for a single person, 60,000 and some change. And maybe that should be revised somewhat frequently if it's 65 or 70 or something like that.
Can we do that actually?
So that is also, it depends on the program, and it's a great point from Jim, and that was feedback we've been hearing throughout the process, and it came up. We had Health and Community Services who administers our work-off program at the open house, and so they have pulled together, I don't have it in front of me, so forgive me, but I believe in addition to healthcare-related discussions, the select board will have Monday night as a recommendation that we revise the income eligibility standards. I think that they start tied to some multiplier of the federal poverty line, which is very low. What we've tried to do in recent years since 2020 is programs that we've built ourselves. We usually stick to the 40B standard, which is 80% of your area median income, which provides a lot more eligibility. So I think we're gonna, for some of us, start trying to get to work on this Monday.
Nice. The very last one, and I don't mean to kind of rush through mine, but I know we have a lot of people on the committee. The idea of regionalization, I think would be extremely challenging, requiring probably a lot of money from the state, and obviously us communicating with other towns. For SEMRAC, obviously that existed, there's relationships there, but I don't know if it makes sense to formally make some sort of planning committee or launch feasibility studies, but I feel like having a plan in our back pocket, even if we don't want to regionalize or can't feasibly regionalize in 10 or 20 years, that process probably has to start now with the speed that government tends to work at. So whatever that form that takes, I just wanted to throw that out there as a long-term plan that we should probably start making steps towards, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
I have a question, clarifying question. You mentioned something about a committee for a couple of these things. Is the intention of this, there's going to be like a committee for each one of these, or is the intention of this that it's going to be the administrative and elected responsibility to make sure we're looking at all those? Or to call, like the first one for a committee to look at pro-growth, I think is reasonable, but not for all of
Agreed.
them.
Yeah, my intent is not for all of them.
Okay.
People could make a recommendation, there should be, but that's not my intent. I think that these are the compacts that ultimately get executed by leadership, and it becomes part of the fabric of policy at times, or it's used as a guidepost. And to your point, like I think the industrial park could have a strategic committee that works with it on behalf of exploring that. It might be folded into the new growth discussion or the zoning and planning. Like there might be one or two, but yeah, I don't think every one of these.
Well, I just say that because recently people have been like, we should have a committee for this and that and this and that. We have so many committees. And if you have a committee that a select board representative is not on, it flounders because the people don't know the rules, right? So they're like trying to think of things, and you need somebody there to say, well, that's illegal, or that's mandated by the state or whatever. And it's just, there's no capacity for it.
So why don't we just go through the list and then we'll circle back, and one of the topics would be what do we really feel passionately about that there would warrant a separate committee, and what might that committee look like? That's a fair point.
Helen, please.
Yes. So I had no debt exclusion projects for a certain number of years. Right? I thought that was a value add to show the importance of this to the voters. I had no override for X number of years. It's not reflected on here, but I also had the final one, which was the except if an asteroid hits the town type scenario. After listening to everyone else's, and apologies, I've missed a few meetings with travel and whatnot, but after listening to everyone else's, I would like to also put mine in the row H, educate and pursue opportunities to minimize impact on seniors, veterans, etc. And then endorsement by town boards. I think it would be disingenuous for someone that is the chair of a town board to say no to that. Well, actually, no, I'll throw I'll throw it in that for that as well. And then I had a similar question about the review long-term healthcare costs and the lobby at the state level, because my understanding was that we obviously were doing this. So I didn't throw a vote in for those. I don't disagree with those, but I don't think it's necessarily something that I'm voting for, because I think there is a lot of Dr. Cabral, I think, has shared many times that there's an active lobbying going on quite a bit. So I would say those are mine.
Okay. So you don't want me to check off the actively lobbied simply because you understand it already to be done?
Let's not bury it. I think we're doing it.
Okay. Denise, please.
So mine's not reflected there, and that's okay.
A few things are, but maybe I didn't capture them all.
I'll just bring up a couple of the things that weren't
Thank you.
discussed already. I thought that this is all what we would like to include in a memorandum of understanding. Okay, I just wanted to be clear. I would like to see that no free cash is used to balance the budget, and that we make a dedicated effort every year to fund the stabilization stabilization fund, that's just not an option. I don't know if this is kind of somewhere in here, but the flavor is when PACE goes away, where's that kind of deep dive board? And so I'd like to see that we have some kind of reconstitution of what we've done here as an oversight.
Just to Dottie's comment, we do have a budget subcommittee who is specifically tasked with that.
I get that, but we've done some really different things that...
Sorry, I was just going to say, maybe to your point, maybe you need to look at the charge of the budget subcommittee and maybe introduce some more asks of it. And I don't know, I'm not saying you do.
I would say dissolve the budget subcommittee and make a new PACE committee. if that.
Yeah, and I put in my and Wendy's kind of collective recommendations that right now what we do, we put, we tie our budget to the schools, tie it to their strategic plan. The town ties our budget to our master plan to show how is this budget going to advance the things the community has identified as priorities. I think there's a lot of different ways you can get that connectivity back to PACE. I think that you can recommend that the town and school budgets identify wherever this pledge lands, like how this budget advances, stalls, or goes backwards on these things. And then maybe after a couple of years, this came up at the open house. I mean, this will be a forever problem, right? So maybe a group is back together in a couple of years. I don't know.
Apologies for interrupting your flow, but I just wanted to speak to the point that Dottie had made.
So Denise, I do have checked off O here for you, the annual review of upcoming budget meets advances of goals. I don't know if that's the sentiment that you're saying, but.
And then the last one is, this isn't anywhere in here, but I'd like to maintain the ratio or the balance between schools and the municipal side. That we, whatever that relationship or that ratio is, that we don't have in a specific year that we have kind of like an imbalance that occurs. That I like that unique relationship that we have with both sides. But that's not reflected in here.
Well, I put in the notes, maintain balance between schools and town. Am I capturing?
You mean like the percentage, 60-40?
I mean, depending on what folks feel on budget growth caps, that would force that to be the case, unless there were different growth factors for each, right? If you say it has to be X percent for both, then it will maintain the split, right?
I can just see in years to come that there could be some really challenging imbalance.
Sure.
And it may occur at the expense of something else. And so I'm just trying to reflect that we need to keep a delicate balance between the two sides.
And did I also correctly capture, you said something about regionalizing services where possible. Is that okay?
For sure.
Okay, very good.
Absolutely. And then obviously the lobbying that we need on Beacon Hill and so forth.
Great, thank you. Chris Cohen, please.
Okay, I guess I did a little different dive. So I reviewed the articles that you sent and made suggestions that we would send out something very similar to what they did. And I noticed a lot of them made promises, all kinds of promises. So even though it's not one of my top 5, I said promises must have a good chance of being viable. So they made a lot of promises that I'm not sure actually could come to be. And that kind of scared me. Now, as far as the first one, I'm not hot on the idea of really looking deep into zoning and stuff like that. You have a planning department. You also have engineers on staff. You have the selectmen. They are well able to do a lot of that planning, I'm sure. So I fall in that it's kind of something. It's already being done. I can't tell you how many times I got tired of sitting on the planning board and somebody telling me exactly what I was supposed to do. And so I don't know if that. So and also you're looking at what you read on the paper and other about planning. There's a lot of out there that can cause chaos. Like let's have no minimum lot size. Let's have no stuff like that. So I think it's better left to the planner, because you have a town planner, and you also have an assistant town planner, right? And so, and you have a planning board, so they know how to deal with those things. That's just my thought. As far as a covenant, I agree that there should be a covenant, or that's an agreement. There will not be an override for a certain period of time. I think you have it on there.
Oh, I didn't have that for you.
Okay.
The no override.
But I just put a certain period of time because it depends upon the override itself. I mean, there were towns that were making a covenant. They were agreeing that they weren't going to have an override for 3 years or 2 years. But could they prove that, in fact, that they couldn't? You know, they're making a promise that may not work out. And also, Norwood had a restriction on the number of new employees for a period of time. I think that was, I think that was a good one.
So-
And then you have on the end here, letters of endorsement of town boards. I didn't see my name off on that, but endorsements of town board, I agree with that. I think that was a very effective, it was there.
Yeah, I think I have that, and I did check off the department head seeking budget efficiencies, including no new hires. I checked that off for you too.
And one thing I really liked was what Norwood had was a tax, if we're gonna send this out, was a tax calculator that was on page 12 of their thing, so that the resident could see how much it was going to cost them, so it was right there and visible. So those are the things that,
And then you also had a note here about state cuts and reallocations frustrate residents. Do you want to talk about that at all? Not
yeah,
favorable to
it's
all?
almost like we're gonna be killed by 1,000 cuts. Because every time you turn around, there's another new tax on this, another new tax on that. The gas has gone up, the electricity's gone up, and that's all to pay for, so that 20% of your electric bill, 30% of your gas bill is not actually going to the gas, but it's going to other things that the state wants. And instead of just coming out with a new tax for those things they want, they tack it on to something else. So every time you turn around, there's new taxes on cable television, there's new tax on phones. Everywhere you turn around, there's a tax. And I think you know how you were talking about bad timing with the, it's almost like we're coming in, all of a sudden, everybody's gonna get these new taxes that are just seem to be coming. And it could change the perspective as to how they view the override. It was just kind of a
Thought.
a thought that I had. It's nothing that you can put on there. It's just, it was just a thought.
Thank you.
So I think that was all I had.
Thank you, Kathy.
So after seeing all this, I wanted to add a few checkboxes. Columns B, C, and D. I feel like they're all kind of nested together. I like the idea of looking at the land, and I wouldn't know enough about it to have an opinion on it, but I feel as though at least looking at those things as an option would be a good idea. I also agreed with the no more, not doing, promising no debt exclusion projects, at least for a certain amount of time. No override for a certain amount of years. Educate and pursue opportunities. Now I'm making sure I'm actually moving over this one too. And I wanted to add in the department managers seek budget efficiencies, include service deliveries. And I also wanted to do annual growth caps for town and school. Oh, this is harder than I thought. Protect reserves and shield bond rating. I agree with that as well. Annual review upcoming budget meets advances goals piece. And review healthcare costs. But actually, if that's already being done, then maybe we don't need, it's a little redundant.
Well, this category includes the cost share and the annual review of different options for all kind of employees, so.
Still, I believe that they constantly do that.
I feel like though that this is facing the public who don't know any of the things that we're doing.
Okay.
So I think we should include those even if we do them, so people know we're doing them. Or it doesn't mean it's got to be something new, but if people look at it and go, these are the things they're going to commit to, and they don't know we're already doing that.
As long as we're not committing to it like another thing to
No,
do, but
no.
like that we can use what we're already doing.
Right.
Okay. Then you can check it off.
Thank you.
Because so many people are like, hey, have you ever thought of like going to the state and talking to our legislators? And it's like, yeah, we are. Nobody knows we are because we, how would they know, right? So it's important, I think, that people do know that we're calling that out, that it is something that's regular, or like reevaluating the healthcare costs. Most of this, to be quite honest, is already being done. It might be tweaked a little bit here, but it's all important,
To highlight it still.
Thank you, Daddy.
Well, that rolls right over into going to the state level for grants, and I agree with that one too.
Very good, thank you. Okay, Chris Mills, please.
I have to bounce between, I'm going to kind of read what I wrote. I wrote a novel, so obviously it'll be the Cliff Notes. But the Sustainable Growth Committee, I've made no secret about the fact that I think that's important, if for nothing else, the optics. But I think something good will come out of that. That said, the next one, it had to do with
Conservation the next one you had
yeah,
was
well,
no
that
debt excluded.
the conservation restriction I put in there as well.
You
I
want
don't,
that? Okay.
don't know what, yeah, that's, and again, I think people need to realize when you apply for a building permit in town presently, you have to, before it gets submitted to building department, it goes through Concom. They very efficiently and quickly review it. They look on a GIS map and they say, oh, you're within Easton's, I believe it's 200 feet. And the state recognizes 100 feet. So the difference between 200 and 100 feet could cost somebody thousands of dollars in engineering and time. It happened to me. And at the end of the day, and you know, the Conservation Commission is very reasonable, but again, it costs sometimes thousands of dollars and time. If they denied something, you can just apply to the state and they just overrule it. So it's almost, that doesn't need to be there, but I've talked about that until I'm blue in the face. The next one that I wanted to touch on was, it was a menu, and I was not saying a menu style override. Where is it?
Let me see. I think that's the one that just we had a tech problem. I can add that to notes. Tell them about what you were thinking, Chris.
So over the past few meetings, I remember back in probably December when we were starting to come up with numbers, and a lot of people, I remember like Marissa, the school side, actually saying, well, you know what, a lot of the money suck is on the school side, so therefore our cut should be on the school side. One of the things that, and again, this is by my third time going through this override process since, you know, living in town forever, but one of the things that people constantly, one of the things that deters people from voting for overrides, at least within this town, is that they have all said the same thing, and that's, I'm going to vote for this. It's great. The money's going to go to, you know, X for the fire department, X for the police department, X for the schools, and everything like that. But then the next year, it just all goes back into the same pot, and then the schools just take what they want, and the town side gets the crumbs. I know that's not exactly what happens. Sorry, Alicia, but that is just the feeling from the general public. And again, I'm not school bashing at all. It is just that is what is said time and time again. Some towns have actually said when they do that initial override, so let's say we're doing 7.3 million, whatever, and they've divvied it up saying, you know, schools will get 2 million out of this. Municipal side will get, you know, 5.3 million out of it. However it's divided up. That ends up being the way it is for that amount of money in perpetuity from budget cycle to budget cycle to budget cycle. I have, I forget what the towns were, but I did read that was, I'm not saying it's a common thing, but it's done. That may pacify a lot of the people that you're getting ready to refute something.
On the spot, but if you could send that to me and probably the superintendent would be helpful, because my understanding is even when you do the department level specificity in the year of the approval, just like we can't bind future boards to do a certain thing, town meeting is the ultimate appropriating authority. So if you, let's say you carve it up and say it's, you know, 4 and 4 for each department, that has to do that in that fiscal year. But in the successive years, this is my understanding. Again, I'm not being a troll. Like,
No, I think it was from the documents that were put forth. Now,
well, those might have just been kind of policy pledges or something.
Sure.
But ultimately, town meeting, just like we currently actually, we already have a policy that mandates building. Forgive my voice. I've been in a lot of meetings. Building our stabilization fund. Thank you. But if voters at town meeting, we have a policy that says no more than 50% of our free cash. Right, and we've been at many town meetings where voters say, okay, well, more should go into the school budget or the police budget. So, and that's town meeting's ultimate say. So all I'm saying is that it is interesting to hear, and if you could share that, it would be appreciated.
yeah, I'll look through the documents. Now, to your point, the town has the ultimate say at town meeting. I have yet to see when someone has tried to adjust the budget at town meeting that it did not get disastrous. So I don't know how efficient that is when the budgets get presented and someone says, all right, I want to reallocate 200,000 for the school. That has yet to go well, at least the town meetings that I've been through. But that process is there. That was one. And the one thing that people need to realize is you hear this, we have stabilization money. I'm not going to vote for anything until all that stabilization money is used. Stabilization money for a town, especially a town like Easton, is incredibly important because of our bond rating. Our bond rating, which is set by Moody's, that allows us to just keep them. That allows this town, when we do need to borrow, to get very efficient interest rates and things like that. So while we do have that stabilization money, it's not to be relied on. I understand that we're always going to have to use some form of stabilization money to balance the budget because we're just 10 years from now, we're going to be talking about the same stuff, just a different cycle. But it's important for people to realize that we can't not vote for an override because there's stabilization money that we haven't used yet. You don't want to run your savings account down to negative $5 before you get an equity loan. You know what I mean? It's there. It's money that can be used, but you'd rather not used. One from Franklin. This agreement will be reviewed by the parties. If substantial changes are made to state funding, unfunded mandates increase to a level of having a financial impact on the town's operating budget or other extraordinary or unforeseen events occur. And it's just a disclaimer that we should put in there. I feel that a lot of these covenants kind of sound like IOUs from a car salesman. Mm-hmm. So no, really. And if we are going to put something like that in there, I don't want it to seem like, well, we know this whole override sounds cheesy, but we're going to promise that we don't come back to the well. So, I mean, I checked off like no overrides for so many years and everything like that, but in reality, I can't forecast a building falling down and having that need to be addressed. So, and I think if you put something like that in there, that's just all people are going to see. And that's it.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, perfect. Nightingale and Reed, I think your comments were.
Yeah, we've shared them jointly. Or
You can start, I'll add.
So a lot of similarities with what other folks have contributed. I think one of the things that I want to add, and this is my perspective as one of the folks who hopes to continue to be employed here managing this work afterwards, is as far as a ton of these pledges, and I appreciate folks saying we're doing some of this already, or some of it sounds IOU-ish. A lot of it is also work. And so in my opinion, this should be conditioned on the override actually passing, because there's pieces in here we simply can't do, right? Or that are not relevant, right? The pledge to not seek an operating override is predicated on an override passing, right? And so I think that's a really important piece. I feel very strongly professionally about that. I also think it is important that, and a lot of these other communities have them, but at the end of the day, the question of is it an ad hoc committee, is it another board? We do have elected boards who are responsible for the policy level leadership. And so it is, in my view, critical that whatever PASE lands on, and the leadership of these boards are here for this reason, right? Whatever PASE lands on, if it's not adopted by those big three boards, then it is really an IOU from a car salesman, and it has no force, right? So I think that's really important, which makes this group and the leadership here getting it to a place we feel comfortable with without overpromising, I think, important. As far as, you commit to a certain amount of time, one of the things I've heard a lot of these things where folks saying, oh, okay, now this makes sense now, what about the next 5 years? And as we've shown when we did the forecasting before, if healthcare keeps going up 10% a year, we're in trouble in year 2 no matter what.
Right.
And so I do think there's still value to pledging a certain amount of years that we will not proactively come back to the well. But there are already exemptions carved out, like under state law already. For a special town meeting, a petition of 100 signatures of registered voters can put an article on the warrant. So, you could have a carve out that addresses like a court order, a legal decree that a building be fixed or something. A massive unfunded mandate could be a carve out, or how PACE came to be in the first place, which is if there's a petition to town meeting that says we want this to be brought back up, or there's an amendment filed to a budget that voters approve that say we want this to be brought back up. I think those are safeguards that say this is what we intend. We all acknowledge we can't actually forecast 5 years out. And these are legal safety release valves in case of an emergency. And here's democratic release valves. All of us might not be here in our respective roles in 2 or 3 years, right? So we can't bind the school committee of 2030 or the select board of 2030 or the voters at town meeting, right? If town meeting votes, town meeting can actually force an override from the floor of town meeting. They could amend the budget with the right language and say, stipulate on an override. So I just think that you can put carve-outs there that are transparent and fair. But I do think a commitment is important.
Right.
Tax and financial relief programs, that's really big. I'll be honest, it wasn't until prepping for the open house that I kind of pulled from all of our departments and put that sheet together of all of those programs. And I think it's important that we take the opportunity, this is the kind of thing we'll do whether an override passes or not, to have some more education sessions through HCS on what are already the programs that we have. We have some new ones coming online in July that we passed with the building project, like the local circuit breaker match that the assessors are standing up. So I think that's important. I think expanding tax relief and financial relief programs is huge. We have some capacity to do that administratively, but those cost money.
Right.
And we carry in every budget every year, in the overlay budget, an amount of money for exemptions, for abatements, for work-off programs. And I think that to suggest we could increase those without an override right now would be disingenuous because we still have a multiple $million-dollar hole in the budget. But if we do have an override, that should be part of the increased spend would actually be an increased allocation for tax breaks for folks. I think that would be the right thing to do. Budget caps, I think that's something that came up in a lot of these other pledges. It's something I've heard from a lot of folks at our outreach. I think that makes sense to an extent. I just want to make sure that folks on the committee appreciate, and I think you do, but we should talk about it, that the figure we're going with is not a proactive amount of new revenue that's going to take us from where we are now and position us to improve or add things dramatically. Mm-hmm. It's going to probably be incredibly hard just to hold on and make maybe marginal improvements through efficiencies and things. I don't think that means you don't propose a budget cap. I just think that folks need to be eyes open. I think we also need to recognize that a couple of folks that maybe no new hires. Obviously, I'm somewhat biased as a hiring authority for a town. That's a really slippery slope really fast. Does that mean if a firefighter retires, I can't backfill? Does that mean that if it's a certain title, I can't do it, and then so I just change the title and get around it? Or is it at a certain point, if there's a budget cap, that's already a pretty hard ceiling, right? And there's a lot of moving pieces in there that are almost all personnel driven, right? What are the wage packages unions negotiate, right? You can have a wage cap or not a wage cap. You could have a budget cap that at the end of the day, it's up to the elected committees and those unions to reach a good faith agreement. And if it's in excess of that, then you pay those cost of living adjustments and you have to cut positions, right? So I think, and I don't say that to sound, foreboding or threatening. I think everyone in our union folks here would acknowledge like it's just a math problem, right? And so I think that we want to make sure and I think everyone here does get that, but I feel like I wouldn't be doing my job on the town's part, and also for the schools, that this is like, if there's a cap there, then people need to appreciate there's a trade-off, and it is very unlikely we would be in a position to make anything outside of marginal improvements through really good efficiencies that we have to work at. So take that for what it is. I don't know if you put some exceptions in there for unfunded mandates, or you have a population change, you have certain types of staff, but I think that this group should think about that. Free cash, realistically, depending on what escalators we were putting into that model, you start to run into the red again as soon as you're 2 or 3. Our existing financial policies say you should not use more than 50% of free cash. I think like in the first year you use none, but this committee should think carefully on, do you want a black and white line there? Because what that means is you'll be in a situation, if this override passes, we would not be using reserves theoretically in the budget. Our reserves would actually be in an okay place. So if we have 9 million collectively between free cash and stabilization, and we're gonna go 100,000 into the red, do we immediately resort to layoffs, right? So having flexibility, I think, is important. Well, right. But Denise's point is good, but part of why so many people are surprised, like, how can it be this bad, is Easton has forever, outside of 2007, fiscal 7, when the last override passed, leaned on reserves because of the structural revenue gap. And so that's just baked in. It should not be. It hurts our capital position. It hurts our ability to upgrade our bond rating. I just want to flag the importance of some flexibility. Regionalizing services, I agree. I think there was a feasibility study for SEMRAC. These things can take 10 years sometimes, but they're, in my opinion, worth it. SEMRAC's been amazing, and it was a huge ability for us to make it as far as we did on the town side, as far as, you know, to cut spending substantially and get here. You know, whether that's you do like a pre-feasibility project where you outline just what's actually in the scope of possible, what are the services that you legally could regionalize, right? Because let's not spend time ideating on something that's not even legal, right? So something like that's doable. I'm getting there, I promise. Long-term financial liabilities and fixed costs. A couple people brought it up. It is correct that we do monitor our health insurance. We do go to market every 2 years with our loss ratios to see if anyone else will take us on. But it shouldn't go without saying that where this committee stands on those things, because there are hard choices in that area that the town and schools and our unions and our retirees need to consider, right? In full transparency, I am recommending to the select board on Monday that they vote to adopt a declining amount of town contributions to future retiree health premiums, because we now know what the GIC rates are for next year. They are catastrophically bad. They're going up 12.7%, I think, after a 10% increase. That's more in 2 years than they took the past 10 for healthcare. It's more in growth to healthcare in 2 years than we spend to run all of health and community services. It's more of an increase to our healthcare budget in 2 years than what we've increased the police department by in a decade. So I can't, in good conscience to this community, not put options like that in front of the select board, as much as I don't want that to be the case for our workforce, who are already, frankly, nervous enough and stressed enough with job cuts and things. But I don't think PASE would be doing its job if we're spending 9 months on this and looking at, you know, if it's okay to talk about reducing staff positions, and if it's okay to talk about raising taxes, which are both deeply painful, then I think we can't kind of not acknowledge that healthcare, pension, and insurances are the difference maker in the past 18 months. That took us from strained but getting by to the house is on fire. So I didn't mean to monologue on that, but I think that that's really huge. One of the things that impacts our bond rating is not just the cash reserves on hand, it's our actuarial liability for other post-employment benefits, which is just a fancy way of saying the town, and I say the town, it's town and school, it's in fixed costs. But our estimated financial liability for paying our share, which is in most cases 75% of a premium for employees who retire, and that most recently was estimated $149 million. And so that's not unusual in municipalities, but that is something that ratings agencies are increasingly looking at when weighing your creditworthiness. And we currently have a $25,000 annual recurring contribution into the OPEB trust. It's obviously nowhere near enough. So we've heard from a lot of folks, like, we have to fix this here, we have long-term issues. This is, to me, potentially long-term issue number one that I really think we need to take seriously.
I agree.
Capital, everyone talked about it, and the long-term revenue generation, I think it's really important. Everyone has talked about it a bit here, and we've heard it a lot from folks. I don't think it should go without saying, you're right, we do. We have competent members of our planning board are excellent, the staff are great, but they can only do what town meeting will approve, right? And so when we look at this and we see promote growth, potentially reduce building restrictions, in this context, in this room, that makes like all the sense in the world to a lot of people. But as someone who has been at town meetings, I'm not criticizing voters, but I think Jen, I'll look to you. Like, it is not a foregone conclusion that you would go to a town meeting in Easton or in most suburbs in Massachusetts and say, hey, we want to upzone, we want to allow more density or more height or roll back environmental regs, and it's good for the long-term balance sheet, and people agree with that, right? And so helping people understand that there is fundamentally a choice, and Tom and Nancy have done a great job tying these things together, but it is, and I joked about this early on, that there's a Venn diagram out there that says great services, low tax increases, low growth. In the middle it says is not real. And that's true. And these are choices, and I think there's an immense amount of value for those boards that are competent, but they are often, they have a hard job in front of them to make even modest changes, and as I'm sure you know. Right? I remember. And so having this committee that spent all this time so publicly looking at these things, say, hey, we think that's actually really important, and support their efforts, I think is huge. And I will say for those staff and those people that I appreciate all of you doing that. Everyone has said infrastructure, so that's great. I like to hear that. I also suggested perhaps a moratorium on the acquisition of new land for passive preservation. A lot of folks have identified that one of the main challenges to our balance sheet is that roughly a third of our land is preserved or non-tax generating. That is part of why Easton's beautiful. That's part of why we love it. But that's already in the books, right? So I think it's fair for maybe a finite period of time, or maybe through the CPC already has a prioritization list. Maybe there's some standards adopted, like if the land is already unbuildable due to it being wet, like do we need to spend money acquiring it at all, right? Or is nature going to do its job and keep it from being developed? And then the last piece, Wendy, that I had was assessing results, which is similar to what folks have said, which is either include things in the budget message that identify how we're advancing this pact, and then maybe PASE is reseeded at some point in the next few years, because making it all the way to 2030 without this coming up again is, I think, like borderline impossible. So sorry for taking so much time. But
No, thank you. It's excellent detail. Excellent.
There's two people. Yeah, did you say?
Yes.
I mean, I read right from it. So
I know, you covered it all. I mean, but I definitely want to stress the impact of the long-term liabilities does need to be addressed.
Thank you. Sousa.
So I also agreed with the Pro-Growth Advisory Committee as well as the review conservation restrictions. I feel like a lot of what I might say might have to be amended after what Connor went through to offer up that context of the feasibility within specific places. I also agreed with the relaxed permits on new construction and increased permit costs. I didn't check off the override for the debt exclusion projects, though I can easily see that also being an important thing to consider. I did only just go with the override for X number of years, but I'm reconsidering that with the idea that if sustainability is the process and the potential of what we'd have to come back for, it seems like an empty promise. I also agree with the educate and pursue opportunities for those that are at risk. Let's see, one other one that It's not checked off here, but I did have it on my list of things, was the department manager seek budget efficiencies, specifically because I liked some of what the town of Norwood had said in terms of specifically like the number of people that would be added, and I totally agree with Connor's statement about if you have a retiree, like what do you do in those moments? And so I definitely think it's like maintaining level services have to be a priority in those areas, but when adding new positions, just keeping in mind that if personnel is the added and increased cost, that we have to be mindful of what that would do to the long term. I also was thinking in terms of like education, that any new hires that were done are only for student facing positions. So we're making sure that like the tier 1 supports are put in place to most benefit students. And also where possible and feasible, because again, I am only one person in a small area in my little bubble, but if there are redundancies in town and schools, if we can consolidate positions, I've seen other towns do that, and I think that might be something that could potentially work and just have more communication between both places. I had the annual growth caps for towns and schools. Again, some of the language that was in the other overrides I thought was kind of good, like the 2.5% increase for certain places, like 6.5 to consider like special education costs that could go up over time. I liked the protect the reserves and shield bonds. I like the idea too of regionalization. I didn't think of that before, and I think that that is kind of where things need to go, but the feasibility of it in the moment seems challenging. And then I also had, and it's not checked off here, but like to review the long-term healthcare costs. And I really liked what the town of Norwood did, where they at the time did it at like a percentage that I think was matching what was happening at the time, but it's no longer that case. I originally like programmed an increase of 12%, but that is currently now outdated as well, just to accommodate the increase and potentially move it to the stabilization if we're lucky that it's under. And I think actively lobbying is important too, even if we are already doing it. I think I kind of touched a little bit on my notes portion about like specific numbers where it would be added for caps and such, but if I can clarify any of that, I can do so as well.
Yeah, that was interesting. I think you were the only person who really tried to tackle that. Maybe there are some things that need to be carved out from a general cap number, that there are things like special education services or that might need a much larger number, or insurance growth, because we just know that that's what's happening.
And I think it was in part because kind of what Connor was saying, the specificity matters in this moment, because there are going to be things that we can't control. And that was specifically taken from other towns, like it was the town of Norwood who did that. Mm-hmm. But I think it has to be indicative and representative of what Easton needs in that moment too. So,
thank you. Jen?
Let's see. You can scroll down so you can see what I did.
I'm trying not to go too fast for our view.
So I would say yes on column B. You can add me to that. I am curious, how do we think that would differ from, say, the Economic Development Council or some of the other Envision Easton and these other groups that are already focused on forward facing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that's probably why Dottie raised, like, do we have to bind that to saying this is a committee, or is it just like PASE makes a recommendation and they task, in this case, if it's about land use, it'd be the select board in my office to work with the existing committees to do it. Because I'll be honest, even staffing the existing committees we have is extremely hard. So whatever the committee lands on, we'll be supportive of. But I agree with Chris, and I don't think anyone here is trying to overstep that, and we have brought the chairs of both Concom and Planning up to speed, but they do have those committees already, so I'm agnostic on that. I do think the existing people could certainly take this and run with it, but...
Okay, all right, yeah, so I think, I love the concept of it, but I think, yeah, it may, the folks who would be best suited to carry out that work may already be doing it, just it's called something different or split up among this team and that team, so.
Well, I think those regulatory boards getting this kind of feedback from PACE would matter a lot.
Yeah.
In perhaps in form, and like the planning board is not submitting any zoning to town meeting this spring because of what we were doing, the budget and everything else, to take a beat and see where this lands, which I appreciate. Mm-hmm. So they're already paying attention.
Okay. I do want to just voice a concern that any language around conservation, et cetera, be very carefully considered. I would not want us to put forth language that will inadvertently wake up or incite an active voting bloc to have concerns that may motivate them to not vote for an override. So there are people in this town care very deeply about conservation and about the environment, and I think it's, and have been very supportive of measures over the years. Again, I just want to be mindful that that is a group of, there are folks who care very much about that, and want to be super.
That's
yeah.
consistent with what I think as well. So don't lose the qualities that make Easton special.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's okay to kick the tire.
Yeah,
You're saying it's okay
yeah,
to kick the tire.
exactly, yeah.
But, in response to that, what I was proposing is just what the state's gonna allow anyways.
Right, and I think that's an excellent.
It's just a comment.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point.
It's not
right?
like, I'm not saying clear cut everything and,
Yeah.
it just,
Yeah.
at the end of the day,
Like, I think your point that if the Conservation Commission here gives a ruling that's more conservative, that somebody seeking a permit can just go to the state and get it override anyway.
Yeah.
Then that's helpful, really helpful information, I think, for people to understand.
and there is a significant cost when you're paying engineers,
Mm-hmm.
and time too sometimes. Although and I'm not bashing Concom because they've streamlined and definitely made things better, but still.
Yeah, okay, yeah. It just, go ahead.
Quickly, the planning and the zoning and the conservation are very complex. And you have laws and you have regulations. And regulations can be let go, they can be omitted. They can override, if it's a recommendation, then it doesn't have to be treated as law. And so a lot of it also comes down to, not picking on people on boards, but it comes down to what is the mindset of the board as how do they deal with regulations? Are they dealing with regulations as if they were laws when they don't have to be? And sometimes that's where you run into the problem as well. So it's also it's a nature of a person on a board that also affects this whole thing. So it's a very complex issue, and it's best handled by the town administrator. I just threw that in.
There you go.
Look at him, buddy.
Just to see if you were awake.
A long 6 months.
Oh, 6 months. Oh my goodness gracious.
It's just Wednesday.
Okay, so moving through, if you can please add a checkbox for me for column H, I think that's an excellent idea.
Thank you.
Let's see, I think, yeah. Endorsement by town boards, I guess I assumed that was an unsaid,
You may notice some of those pledges didn't have all the signatures on them that we were
Oh,
providing.
you know what? I didn't notice that, actually. I did not. So, okay. Yes, I believe that town board should be endorsing these. Let's see, regionalized servicing, I think, is a great idea. And some type of annual review, just to make sure that we are keeping our commitments. And I think the review of long-term healthcare costs as well. In terms of lobbying, I know I put it in my feedback. I do think it's something that we actively do on the school committee, but I think it can help make it visible to voters so that because one of the things, right, that we've said is one of the main drivers of our problem is our state funding. So I want them to know that we are doing everything that we possibly can to try to change that in the long term, and we'll continue to do so even if it's like pushing a boulder uphill. We're not going away. So.
Thank you. Did I capture everyone's? I think I did. So just looking at these with the new numbers, the highlighted ones now have 9 or 10 comments for them, and we have 7 of those topics, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm including number 7 as this important note about the opportunity to change gears if you have to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yes. So I don't know where we go from here, or those are, oh, Dr. Paul?
Just, I think, a point of clarification. So my name wasn't on there, and I didn't volunteer it on purpose because I'm not a resident. But the reason I say that is because what I think I heard in different ways from different people was a lot of the things are already happening, or I think it's important to maybe, or maybe it's just my own clarification, fine tune the purpose of this. Is it to advise or support different entities in town to do these things, or is it as an advisory to the taxpayers like the override that they should be rethinking or supporting some of these things? I was looking at it more of, these are recommendations for the town that asked the committee to be put together of things that they should look at, and therefore felt it was inappropriate for me to weigh in as a non-resident for those things. But I think that's where some of the, not confusion, but maybe the, well, I'm not sure why that's on there because we already do it, comes from, is because there are some things that maybe you're just endorsing this practice that's already being done, or are you saying these are things that you're recommending taxpayers either pay more attention to or rethink their prior stances on, or become more engaged in finding out about? And I think that's where I felt it was inappropriate to weigh in to say those things. But I think along these categories, to make them more parallel in structure and determine which of those is it, or is it kind of two separate lists?
Yeah, I think it could be both, actually. So just because we do something, chances are good the residents still don't know about it. And this is a very public-facing way to reaffirm that we already do this, we believe in it, and we're actually committing, by putting it on this document, to continuing to do it. So to me, that's a good thing to educate. And if we're already doing it, candidly, like check the box. That's very good for us. We're doing the right thing, and I think we always try to. Some of these things, I think we're adding some more meat to. Like the PACE committee is supposed to keep going, then that's a commitment, and the town is committed to supporting that and creating that and doing that. Doesn't mean it's this committee, but it means it's some form.
Where I'm hearing like tension or question perhaps is there's already a committee that does that.
Yeah.
Or, those are the planning, for example, or Concom are the experts in that. So are you saying that they should continue to Connor's point, are you making a recommendation that new growth be pursued, that building restrictions be lifted? Or are you saying you're recommending to the townspeople that those are considerations because some of them are already happening?
We're letting the town know that so we don't have the wording, these are 7 words,
Right.
Like it's
Exactly.
6 words. They'll be fleshed out with more detail. That detail, I would expect in that example, would be a commitment. PACE is recommending a commitment be made to the residents of our community that we pursue discussion paths forward that encourage and support new growth. Most likely in a manner that doesn't jeopardize those inimitable qualities that make Easton so special.
Because I see that as different than establishing a committee.
Got it. And again, we took feedback.
No, I
from
get it.
19
I'm for my own
people.
clarification.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yep.
we tried to find common threads
Right.
to
Got it.
be able to walk 19 people through.
Yep.
Right.
And I think it was done well, but I just
500 yeah, no,
yes.
I agree. So the next step is where you'll get your clarity. And that's where we as a team come together to say, what does the final document read?
Got it.
I would, so it's 9:05. So hopefully that gave some insight.
Yes,
and then
thank
we
you.
can pivot a touch. So it's 9:05. We have 3 articles to go. I would recommend something for this. I would recommend Nancy and maybe 1 or 2 other people take a stab at all of the engagement we've had here today to write what that compact looks like, so that we can share it with the committee. We can give feedback to those people, of course, correct, and then we can come back on March 19th and we would all read that document and haggle over words, commas, thes, us, all that stuff. Is that fair? Okay.
So does that fit with your Nancy's goal of presenting the final pitch of PACE 5 days after to the select board on March 24th?
It does,
Cool.
because
Okay.
the next expectation is we're not going home on March 19th until we're done. So I would, the key is, right? You don't feel good. You don't look good. Do your homework, right? Well, no, you're sick. Do your homework, right? So you have to engage before March 19th. If you don't, and you show up and you have 5 million questions or you haven't given feedback, it'll take a long time on the 19th. So hopefully, candidly, the fact that we all fall in pretty straight categories, and the reality is, like, I'll give a good example. I didn't have educate and opportunities to minimize impact because I just believe we already did that, and then afterwards somebody made that point, like, put an X there, like, I'm all in on that. So I think it's just more about writing it up. We have 4 examples from other towns that have already written almost all of these things. So if 2 or 3 people, including Nancy, could do it. So I don't want a 6 or 9 because then that gets tricky. But Jim is
See Jim
volunteering.
expressing interest.
Anybody else?
Can I offer to just, and I think, and it depends. If some of these things are technical things that I do think, I could either get you all on the 19th or I could help.
No. So I'm sorry. So let's clarify also. Good call. So what always happens is the 2 or 3 people that can do the work, get 85% done.
Sure.
The right people to review that before we bring it live, and you may not know I do this pretty regularly. If there are things, like I'll bounce it off Connor or Dottie or Dr. Cabral for, like, am I violating something? Like, is this wrong? So we do that naturally. We will do that in this case as well, so that before it comes live, there isn't some dead issues that you guys shouldn't even be talking about, if that makes sense. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's great.
Cool. So it's Jim and Nancy so far. Somebody want to tell Dottie that she got volunteer? Marissa? Are you sure, Marissa? Because you're running out of pages in your notebook.
I already have another one, it's fine. This
Okay.
one's just for PACE and NEASC, so.
You should hold up. That's just for PACE.
Right
and
now,
what?
this is NEASC and PACE, yes.
Alright, so that's like 4,000 pages.
Your handwriting's amazing. Dear God.
Have you guys not sat next to her? You should
I mean,
Color coded too?
Oh,
it's
look at-
a lot. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Okay, so
I was embarrassed to open my calendar in front of her. I thought she was going to look at this and be
Let's,
like, "What's this girl doing?"
let's close out on this. Thank you all for your feedback.
Thank you.
I
Thank
think
you.
it was worth it.
May I ask one question, or we can take this after the meeting? We wanted final product by the 19th.
Before that, for review by other parties, so we
I
can
guess,
talk about.
Is there a specific date you'd like to have it, or the proofreaders would like to have it by, or maybe
Sure,
the 4
so
of us
any-
can talk after the
So
meeting?
Nancy can calendar.
Yeah, and
Of course.
Nancy has contact with me very easily, and I'm sure Dr. Cabral as well. I'm
Good
available.
point.
I would
Yeah.
prefer to not get it the 18th. So, like, honestly,
I'd even
what
like
I
to
would-
give it to everyone before the 19th.
Yeah,
That's what
I
I
would
was
hope that on an ongoing basis, as issues arise, they just get flagged and we can weigh in and offer technical advice or correct things. And how I view it, if it's being presented Wednesday, I would target that you all have a good draft at the absolute latest for Friday before.
Correct.
I don't know if that works for your schedule.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about that X date that we, because I think we're
So what I was
unanimous in that.
Fair, that's a great call.
That's actually a huge.
I was going to ask Nancy to put together a poll for us, and if we could just get everybody to give us their dates and/or percentage increases, and then that way we could. I mean, I'm happy to go through it here if everybody's prepared to do that, or I'd rather just ask people to send us like, no, I think it's the cap is 3 years or 5 years, and obviously there'll be exclusatory language. There wasn't a word. It sounded really good. And then,
so you mean ahead of next meeting, having Nancy assign homework of
because
the numerical pieces, which are how many years,
correct,
and what's the budget cap?
what the budget cap.
Okay.
Because then that way we'll debate that at the next meeting. We'll have a language, but we'll be talking about here's the percentage, and we'll share that before we get there, so everybody knows. Look, everybody has said 3 to 5 years. That's pretty cool. Like, we're in the ballpark. If somebody's at like 1 and somebody's at like 20, that could be a long debate, but I don't envision it.
You don't want to do 19 again?
You're not allowed to
I-
be funny right now. It's not okay. That's my.
Chris?
So when you speak to people now, what do you say?
What do I say?
Well, we haven't set the number of years. So if you're talking to people someplace and they ask you, what do you respond?
Yeah. I don't know what you're responding now, but
What
people
you
are
said- well,
asking
what
us
we-
about it now.
We're trying to come up with 3 to 5 years or whatever, how
Yeah.
long this is gonna last.
Yep.
If somebody asks you that question right now,
Yes.
what would your response be? Because
Me
I have,
personally.
I'm gonna be meeting
Yeah.
with the seniors at
Yeah.
Frothingham before we come up with the finding here. And I just thought, it'd be good to go in and have an idea of how to answer that question.
I wouldn't want to give that to you. In situations where we as a committee haven't spoken in that,
Right.
I don't want to influence you unduly. I've said that I have thoughts when I'm in that moment, but the important thing that I'm here for is to get your feedback. What kind of commitment would you be looking for, given how much of an ask we're actually making in this situation? And help me bring that back to the committee. And you can say that we are all actively debating that. So it's an appropriate topic, it's timely, and I welcome your thoughts on it. I think that you can always bookend it by saying the reality is anybody projecting 10 years out probably is going to be difficult. And anything less than a year or two probably means we didn't do enough work on the process itself. So you can help them understand that there's a floor and a ceiling, and then see what they tell you. Somebody says 8 and has a fantastic reason that will change the way we look at this entire image. That's exactly why we're doing the outreach. I'm not sure we found that unicorn or that silver bullet, but I think we've all got nuggets along the way of people sharing something with us that was impactful to me.
Okay,
Is that fair?
that's fair.
Yeah, I didn't even
You
answer
gave me your
question.
answer.
It was good. Nice.
You may not know it,
It was a
but
great honest.
I think that's
Present.
but that happened a lot at the house that I thought was really constructive. And to Dr. Cabral's question, is this a pledge to boards and voters? It's kind of both. I think like PACE, I hope after this helps people feel more empowered that like if we don't like wetland rules, like they didn't fall out of the sky.
Yeah.
Right? If we like these are all collective choices. So
Right.
I think asking people back like, well, what do you think, and why do you think that is helpful? Obviously, I'm not the first person to recognize the Socratic method, but
Right. Okay, so we're good on item
Drink
3.
hemlock.
So we can stop screen sharing this
We can.
now, which, thank you.
I'm gonna switch around the order. I'm not gonna go to the town administrator's update on budget change one. I'm gonna save him for last, so I put the pressure on him as he will be the one to.
Thank you so much.
I am gonna go to the last item first, which is the scheduling of meetings and dates. And I'm just gonna open with probably personal and emotional aspect of, I just wanna acknowledge that I'm getting tired. And I wanna just say it's okay if you all feel tired as well. But there are like deep moments of tiredness. Like Monday, we had the open house, and I was so grateful that there were other people here in a team effort that carried that conversation, because I literally could barely talk to 2 people. And I just want to say I'm being thoughtful about that. And so if I over-index on trying to not have as many meetings and you all feel like we have to lean in, push back on that. Like, that's okay. Maybe I won't be, fired up, and maybe I'll miss 1 or 2, but that's okay. Like, if the team needs that, feel comfortable to say that as we go through this conversation. On the flip side, I tried to pick some dates that gave us some time. I'm thoughtful that there are negotiations, budget discussions, all sorts of things that are going on for many members of our committee and life in general. So March 19th, we have to meet. March 24th is the select board. So I can tell you where Nancy and I will be. We would love to have you there as support. You guys probably don't appreciate as much, and Chris, you said it, I think, but having you with us at the front meant a lot at that meeting. Just knowing that there were 21 people up there was pretty cool. So having you here would be helpful, to be honest. That then means, when do we regroup? we could do it on April 9th, which is a Wednesday. The reason why I'm at the 9th-ish or the 16th, because I know the school vacation is the following week. So I'm keeping the school vacation off the schedule. I think that makes sense. I feel like that makes sense. And then I feel like we're meeting on May 7th, which is a Wednesday. And that is before the town meeting. So I guess where I'm really hemming and hawing are, is it 319, 324, and then we wait until April 16th?
I prefer April 9th.
Got it? Cross the line there, that was quick.
16th is Easter week, you should see my calendar. It's the worst.
Oh, good call, good call.
What time is the select board start at 6 or 7?
For the 24th, that's 6. If that 6 is an imposition for members, and I agree with Tom. I think I'll speak for myself and Donnie and the board. They would very much appreciate this team that's done all this work to be there. We can time the item to be later in the evening because you're going to be part of a regular agenda. We'll have other stuff too. I will probably have a budget update that night too. I'll go after you.
One day liquor licenses.
Yeah.
Can we get one of those?
We need those. We need those.
Just have a bar.
So we can time it for later if 6 is an issue.
Citizens Academy is the same day.
Citizens Academy is the 17th. Do you have it?
And the 24th.
Oh, it's every Monday. Wow. Sorry. Yeah, Jim is involved in 19 different committees now, which is the natural progression of these things.
Welcome to it. One of us.
Yeah. There's no real good way around that. I'm sorry.
So
you should just have Citizens Academy go to a select board meeting on March 24th.
Actually, field trip.
Whose department is that night?
Police and
Police.
Field trip.
Okay, so 319, 324, 49, 57.
Sorry. Can you slow down?
4-9.
Really hard to update a calendar.
319, 324, 49, 57.
So
not almost faster.
Not the 16th?
So we're saying not the 16th, it's Easter week.
Yeah.
So 4.
Of course.
Are we starting at 6:30 every other than select board? Are we planning to start at 6:30 each time?
Yes.
Okay, I want to make sure that's not changing.
Notice that trend.
Just making sure. Asking a question.
You guys like that? Do you feel good?
What's the day after the 9th? The 16th, we're saying? Or no, we're skipping the 16th, 23rd. Got it.
5-7.
Yeah, I got it.
4-9 to 5-7. Now, there might be community events or outreach things that fill in, because that was item 5 that I conveniently skipped over before I got to 6. But I know after the last meeting, I recommend, like, I think I was really still on the high of getting so many people to come, and I called Connor a couple days afterwards and said maybe we should do another one.
It was the morning after.
It felt like
Couple
forever,
of days.
okay? It felt like forever. Like I said, still on the high.
I haven't seen you in hours.
It's a lot of work. So it was a very,
sorry,
it was very
Randy.
pleasant, quick, kind of. It's a lot of work. No, but which I feel as well. Like, I think by that afternoon I was like, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know what I was doing. Yeah, me either. But I think if we had to, maybe we could. Not you. I'm saying, like, as a committee, like if we said, look, there's a big event. Like there are 2 school events that are coming up that.
One of those dates is off.
Oh, can you tell me which one?
Yes.
Thank you.
The Pops concert is actually on April 3rd, which is the same night as our budget hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it's not on the 4th.
Okay.
So I think if anybody doesn't want to go to the select board budget the school committee budget meeting, heard, and if you could go to this
Spring Pops concert.
We're not sure about the date yet. Let's confirm that.
on the concert or
Yes,
April 3rd?
the concert.
Got it, okay. So there's 2 school events that may be available for people to go to,
School
to be at a table,
School music.
to do outreach, share information, grow Mentos. So does anybody want to volunteer to do that? And I don't
Just
know
keep
how we're
'em.
doing on the.
What's the second event?
Well, wait.
Always
There's the
germs.
Richardson Olmsted Parent Teacher Conferences. Would anybody like to do that? March 20th.
March 20th.
Why don't I volunteer for what I can do? Is that
Sure.
helpful? Maybe just to get the ball rolling.
Okay.
The musical this weekend,
Okay, thank you.
March 7th at 7, and then also March 9th at 2. I
Okay,
can do
very good.
those.
You'll be with Denise then for the Friday on the 7th.
Okay.
And that's great.
I'm gonna be there as well, so I can at least pop in.
Friday?
Yeah, Friday.
Very good.
So I was going to ask the question though, what's the expectation for how long we're there? Like just be, everyone's going to be in the musical. It's not like there's a lot of breaks. And should we just be there for like the hour ahead when everyone's waiting for the doors to open?
There's also a home basketball playoff game at 5 o'clock on Friday.
okay.
So there'll be lots of folks there for 2 different events at the same time. So great opportunity.
Yeah, intermission in between would probably be a good time too for people to come out.
So the entire day.
What I would
Keep
say
it to like
is,
5 hours.
once you identify the people that can go,
Yeah, we can chat about
I think
time.
and honestly, if you're there for half an hour, thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Like, that's huge.
I can do more than a half an hour.
But I just
Yeah,
want
yeah.
no pressure. Like,
Yeah.
this is, we're all really trying to do the best we can, and we're all juggling an awful lot of responsibilities. So, this is, I think we have already over-indexed on community engagement than I ever thought we could possibly pull off. And I'm proud of it, and we should keep doing it. So, Jocelyn, I'm gonna put you in charge, if that's okay?
Yeah, I'll
Of
connect
school-related events,
Denise
and you recruit
or
people, whoever can and can't go. What I will do though is I have some materials left over from the prior meetings. They have the wrong date on the lower right corner, but they're still hand-outable, and they still have a QR code to
Yeah, I was wondering,
scan.
like, what are we going to hand out
So,
now?
and we may make some 8.5 by 11s
we
for you.
can update that and just.
I'll probably update
so,
it.
Yeah, if you
That's
want,
fine.
we could connect.
Yeah.
And because the Stonehill money we allocated for outreach, we still have a small balance.
Yeah.
So we can update. I think what we would want to do is include the school committee hearing is now a set date. We'll button up the finance committee hearing, the town meeting, have all those key dates, the QR code stuff, and we can, not for tomorrow or the
that's
7th, but
Yeah.
I see stuff going into late March and April. So
Sure.
if we could connect, we'll get an update and get some new stuff printed for folks.
Could it be something we could use from now all the way through? Like maybe half an 8.5 by 11? So like everybody who goes and does something has something to hand out.
I will work with Jocelyn to come up with something like that and send it to you and Nancy, and as long as the committee is okay with that and the two of you sign off on it, then we are happy to do that.
Might have stale dates as time goes by, but that's okay. It's still,
I-
Okay, I've got 3 with the, 3 meetings at the Frothingham, so any handouts would really be appreciated.
I was wondering too, just from a handout perspective, like, is there, I'm afraid to ask this question because maybe it already exists and I should know about it. But I did browse the PASE documents and I didn't see anything. Just like a shorter summary, but something that, you could really just sit down and read, but it's only like a couple pages. I feel like we talked about making something like that, and then we ended up, making presentations, but did we
that
make?
got out there. That little 2-pager
But-
got out there.
But that is dated. That was from pre-December.
It doesn't have recommendations, you're
Well,
right.
it doesn't have recommendations, and
Yeah.
the
Will it need
size of the
maybe
problem
some
was
updates?
smaller.
That's a good.
So I think Tom actually owns that file.
don't bring me into this.
One of you two does, but we do. So
You
we
can
do.
send it to me,
Yeah,
the file, because clearly
find
I
it.
don't have it.
Yeah, so we can update that and just swap in the new
Yeah.
numbers and the new recommendations because it was a double-sided thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I have that.
Okay, so if you forward that to me and Sean,
And then
we will.
the
We'll update the
presentation
numbers.
from the open house, I
Oh, not to
noticed also
Jocelyn.
isn't on the PASE website yet.
It is.
I didn't see it in the list. The
the slides?
presentation, the slides from the last open house,
From like last week.
like last week, yeah. Which I
Uh,
realized it was only a week ago.
It might just
But
not
I
be in a
didn't.
meeting order. I
Maybe
think
it
was in a
wasn't.
different.
No, it's right on the landing page for PACE.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
I
on
went.
the landing page,
I
not
went
the
straight
order
to
of the
documents,
meetings.
not the landing
Yeah.
page.
Oh, sorry.
So
Yeah.
that's okay.
It might.
I'll go there.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. My browser just like automatically opens to PACE at this point. So might as well just not have any.
And again, I just want to encourage people, like, don't sign up for a lot of work if it's the wrong time to sign up for a lot of work. Like, try to keep it simple if you can. Get out what you need to get done. And if you want to do an awesome 75-page thing, have at it. I'm not limiting, but just
Yeah.
be effective.
No, that's fine. This week we can work. We can connect on handouts. I'll be there this weekend. Yeah.
And Chris, just shoot me an email with the dates, and I'll do my best to get you.
When we leave, Chris, I'll give you some of the old material that we have, so at least you have something, and it'll give you just a little something to have around. And you can let people know, I apologize, it's dated, we're getting more materials as we hit milestones, and just wanted you to have something.
I don't want to overwhelm them with paper either.
Yeah, no, it's one pager.
Do you think we could get that printed by Friday though?
Not professionally. I mean, we could like
On
run.
just paper.
Yeah, well, it depends how much updating it needs.
Okay.
So if we have a file by like, well, what day is it? It's Thursday, so tomorrow. It's Wednesday.
Today's
Tomorrow.
Wednesday.
If we have a file by like the early afternoon
Okay.
tomorrow, we can spend a handful. Like, what are these events? It's Frothingham and the schools are this Friday.
Well, no, I have 2 in April, one and the 19th. So I got plenty of time.
So you have time. When we leave,
Yeah.
I'll go back and grab some of the items out of my car for you.
Oh, okay.
So you at least have them as a
Something,
backup.
yeah.
And so
They're
I will
professionally
look to
printed.
Nancy, who I think is currently trying to find this file.
I can try to have it done by tomorrow.
Yeah, so you have the Canva of the orange and black one, if you
Yeah.
wanna take a stab at that.
Yeah.
I will get Nancy's, the 2-pager that's a little bit more substantive and
Yeah.
update it with the current number space it's working with and try and get that to you.
Okay.
If we're good with it, my staff could print,
Okay.
I don't know how much paper we have in the office,
Yeah.
but we'll print a handful at least, so you have some
Okay.
stuff for Friday, does that work?
Yeah, that works.
Cool.
On the one last thing is I will try to, on the private side, without impact to the town resources, if I can, trying to noodle how to put together yet another widespread community outreach opportunity. Maybe it's not at public facilities, maybe it's at the Knights of Columbus Hall or something, in a way that maybe we can get something donated. I know it's closed, but amusement is a proxy for a venue that could hold 125 people, but you guys see, I'm trying to think of that. But that would be a PASE-led initiative. It would literally be us. It would be no DPW to help us set up chairs. So, but I'm starting to feel strongly that at some point there might be 1,000 people that are really now engaged, and a few hundred want to show up again. And doing it a couple weeks before town meeting might just give one last giant bite at the apple.
Yeah.
So,
We can help. It's just as long as you're talking a couple weeks from town meeting, like that's fine. That's 10 years from now. Like
Sure.
we'll be.
I wasn't going to ask you for help. I just didn't want to say that tonight.
No, I
was going to
appreciate it.
ease into it.
Sure.
I would have. Yeah.
Okay.
Like it was opening with a little bit of like kind of guilt. You'd probably go back and be like, I can't believe he's going to do the Knights of Columbus. That place is closed. See, there was a whole lead in there, Chris, that we were working. Stains in the carpet, you know. Okay, so that's the only thing. If you guys have other ideas, share them. The unions, we'll be reaching back out to the unions, so we've had really good engagement, and we have now hit some milestones, so we'll reach back out to Connor, the police, the fire, the DPW that everybody gave us the info for.
Sure.
We'll reach back out obviously to the teachers as well, and just try to do some of the things we did along the way. We did some school presentations, if anybody wants us to come in, great. You okay?
Yes, thank
you.
2-page early got it.
Yeah, right? You usually give us the throw drops. I don't know what we're gonna do.
Running out, we used them all. Should see us tonight, they're all over
Yeah.
the place.
So that's it. Does everybody feel good that we covered all the topics except for the one item that Connor is gonna have to walk us through at 9:24 at night? Good. Yes. Everybody's excited for Connor.
Cool. I guess I'm not going to present the memo. You all have it. I don't know who's read it. Hopefully all of you. Does anyone have any questions or feedback? We have the budget page, which is the town website / FY26 budget. We created, based on feedback from PASE, a little its own webpage of Citizens Guide to the Budget. Kind of an I'm new here resource. Thank you. So yeah, the budget update was presented to the select board last week. I brought the police and fire chief with me to talk in some level of specificity based on feedback we've heard quite a bit from folks on, talk much more specifically about the types of cuts. I don't know. Did anyone watch? Is anyone aware of what was discussed? We can start there.
I was here.
Okay. So I don't know if anyone has feedback or questions. One of the questions that comes up is why is the deficit smaller now? They must have found money. I'm happy. I love that conversation. I am happy to have it. I think if we can't have it enough, but I'm going to put it back on all of you at 9:30 to tell me what you think we can be constructive about.
I'll just say that I liked the fact and appreciated that we are getting more specific. So I'm looking for, I think that's what our residents need. I think that's what we need as a next driver of engagement. I obviously used real time some of the comments that Chief used in the next 2 days later. So I thought that was impactful. They made it very real. So if you haven't seen it, you should. If you haven't gone and talked to them and looked them in the eye to help appreciate the depth of the impact, you should. Same thing obviously with Connor, Dr. Cabral, and teachers and town employees. You should just make it real for yourself wherever you can. I would encourage that. They using words like embarrassment, like he's a professional who's talented at his job, and to say that is not just a reflection of how he's communicating to his team, but that's how he feels himself. And you just hate, as somebody who motivates people, to feel like somebody you're working with feels that way, right? Like, God, you get somebody who's working hard for you, the last thing you want is them to come in and then feel like not good, right? I thought that Chief Alexander, as always, had just a tremendous amount of information. He had a tremendous amount of examples of impacts about service levels, so on and so forth. I just think the more you all can make it real, like in this case or on April 3rd, it's going to go a long way to helping the residents of our community actually appreciate what's about to happen, or could be about to happen. That was my feedback.
Thank you for your feedback.
Anytime. Good, everybody really wants to go home.
Fair enough.
I think my plan worked.
Well, I would ask all of you to socialize it with your networks, because this is, Tom is referring to the police chief saying one of the things that is likely is we'll be dropping staff overnights, may not be able to staff a station, and that would be embarrassing to him as a lifelong resident and whole career of a police department. We're dropping the detective division, potentially dropping an ambulance. These are incredibly serious and very negative service cuts for the community. And they're also incredibly serious for the safety of the men and women in these departments. We've talked at length, and I made it a point to include in the memo and the presentation, we are already spending so much less in these departments per resident than our peers. I think sometimes folks have a hard time believing that because of the challenges we've all identified of all that tax revenue is coming from 2/3 of our land. Most of that's residential. But one of the things I said to the board that PASE has corroborated is, it is natural and okay for us to have disagreements on the value or merit of any one particular job, position, or program, but it is a numerical fact that in the net, on the town and the school side, we are spending a lot less per resident. And so when we are making these cuts, they're going into the bone at this point. And I don't want to end it on a dreary note, but that is, if folks can't afford an override, that is a very personal and real choice, and they should vote. No. But my biggest fear after doing all this work and my professional concern for this community and for the schools is that with all of this information out there, that folks are continuing, and I'm not criticizing, but I'll feel really heartbroken if folks are voting, thinking that this is smoke and mirrors and that everything will just be fine and that we'll find the money. And I've even heard some folks immediately after the budget was published, they see the deficit's going down. It's like, because I itemized lobbing off tons of services and jobs, that's how the number got smaller. Right?
And it will continue to, just to.
It will get to
a
zero.
minute or less, to Connor's point before, people keep saying, well, you're saying people aren't finding money, but they did, because it went from 6.3 million to 5.4 million. That is not finding money. That is the purpose. We have to get to zero. That's the law. The point is you have to get to zero. It's from reductions fine tuning of numbers that come in. 12% was the estimate for insurance, now it's 12.7, that number changes a little bit. And as things get cut, it has to get to zero. So that's not an accident it changed, it's the purpose. We have to move that to zero. It's going to continue to get lower. That isn't finding money, that's eliminating money.
We will
from the
balance the budget through an enormous amount of cuts.
That was something I was going to say that I appreciated from the meeting was that you were clear in the places that where things were being impacted. There was a lot of transparency there, and then showing that things had already been cut. So that was a takeaway that I got out of it, is that 5.4, that new number, wasn't because money was found, but because cuts had already been made.
Thank you.
I would highly recommend, if you can, go to the budget meetings. So I think that's where the pivot begins, whereby like people have come and said, I want to talk to you about this one program for $34,000. You should really go to the school committee meeting about that. Like you should share with them how you feel about that, and they can get that feedback live. That's where they're into that granularity, and importantly, they're best positioned to talk about that, about the value of it, why we do it, why we don't do it, all that. But I would encourage this group to go, because I'm assuming that the school committee meeting will be well attended, and you will get a lot of feedback, and you'll have an opportunity to hear it. You can obviously share your own feedback, so please know that we are, as resident, if you are a resident in this community, you can go up and share. I don't know if non-residents can share, I don't think so.
At the budget hearing or at a regular?
Just at a regular school committee meeting? Isn't that why you ask somebody their name and their address?
Yeah, we're actually
For the record,
looking.
for the minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're actually,
so-
there's a recommendation actually that, that get brought into, constituents, because you have staff
Sure.
who don't live in town, and you may have families or caregivers of students who are Easton students but don't technically live in town. So
Good point.
we are actually
So-
looking at that.
I digress a little bit, but I would just encourage you all to go, listen, you'll get feedback. You can ask people questions, like maybe somebody has a good point, and it might inform just PACE and you in general. So if you can go, and support your fellow people on your PACE committee that you've worked with, being present can be helpful. Anybody else have any thoughts for tonight? Take a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
That was Nancy, that was Helen
Yeah.
and Donahue. All those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous. Thank you, Joe, and thanks everybody who joined us on